Bow chicka bow meow. Waiting on Getter. All right, y'all, let's do this thing. Let's do this thing. All right, welcome to What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. Almost inside the numbers there. See, little Mondays get messed up. Don't forget to like the videos if you like them. Share them far and wide. Okay, that's a huge amount that you do for us when you do that. Advertisers and algorithms. Advertisers and algorithms. Double A's for all of you who love alliteration out there. All right, Barnes is going to be with us shortly here. This is what Barnes and I want to talk about today. And I got some clips I'm going to run, but I'm going to wait for Barnes. Actually, maybe one of them he's seen before, no doubt. We could just roll through it. I want to talk about, so does Robert, the difference in the polls now between now and 2020. And the interesting thing is, everyone's talking about, well, Trump underperformed, he underperformed, and past is not always prologue. But if it is, then maybe this race isn't as close as some people suggest. Now, I'm not telling that to Trump supporters out there to rest on their laurels. I'm simply saying, let's take a look at the demographics that caused Trump to underperform in the polling, all right? And compare how they were voting back in 2020 in the polls compared to how they're voting now, and have pollsters really fix these problems. What is causing this shift? Is it the same coalition in 16 and in 20 that help Trump outperform the polls, or is it a different coalition? Are there still some of those demographics that did it, those key demographics that really fueled all of this? Where are they voting? Who are they voting for? Because that really will determine whether or not there could be an overperformance again. All right. But while we're at it, I got another one. We all saw this ad. So Robert is here. Let me roll it real quick. Actually, let's have Robert say hello first. Then we'll roll it. It's not even an ad. It's a clip. Robert, what's going on, my friend?
Good news. It looks like another win for a political prediction betting market in federal court against the Biden administration that, for whatever reason, is obsessed with shutting these down. So it looks like we'll have more political betting options just in time to bet against the Democrats this fall.
I think we all know why they want to do that, right? Come on. Yeah. Let's say they can't control it. The entire website 538 is for controlling of expectations, narratives, and betting markets. Once upon a time, that website used to shift betting markets like crazy. It has been wholly ignored by some of these markets this cycle. In fact, I think some people are starting to catch on to what you have been saying for years, which is that if you bet against 538, now, broken clock's going to be right twice a day. But if you bet against them, Robert, you're going to make money, right?
Yeah, well, if you just think of it as margins like spreads in college football, NFL, the predicted margin between the teams. If you bet that they overestimated the Democratic margin in every single state, you would be 100-0 in the last two presidential elections. In other words, they overstated the Democratic margin in every single state in back-to-back presidential elections. That's hard to do.
And it's not really statistically sound. So if
No.
there is a real methodology behind a real model, you should have these under and overs. I mean, both. You should have, for people who don't really know this stuff, you should have misses in both directions, people. That's really like the layman's term.
A
Like,
margin of error shouldn't be a partisan error that is
shouldn't be a partisan
particularly
error.
partisan.
That's
No.
right. And same thing goes with polling, by the way. The
Yeah.
same thing goes with polling. All right. So, which is what a lot of these polls, these so-called models are doing anyway. They're just looking at polls, they're unskewing them how they want. In the case of 530, I don't know that Elliott does that the way that Nate Silver, and still he does it with his model. As you can tell, he threw ActiVote out of his thing. They're all downplaying now. I don't know. Something may be wrong with the New York Times poll now. I mean, this is crazy, bro. I mean, ActiVote there has had some really decent performances, but I have pointed out the flaws. None of them are the ones that he's suggesting, because he's like, I put my number in and it gave me this wrong information. It's like, well, because genius, then voter rolls are dirty, which is the word I've been using for like a decade. They're not as good or as clean or as up to date as they should be. And that's a problem that none of us want to address. Some people do try, but like, none of us, like as a government, have been addressing this. I'm trying to be nice here and refrain from using profanity. Whenever I hate this guy, I can't stand. Well, hate's a strong word. I don't really hate anyone, but I can't stand this guy. He's just such cancer on this whole process. But the fact of the matter is, like anyone who's in this industry, which he does not come from this industry, anyone who's in this industry knows that it is very simple. If you change your phone number, jackass, then you're going to get someone else's number. And guess what? Once upon a time, they may have signed up to vote with that number. So they're going to think you're that number.
Yeah, I have multiple phones, and I get poll requests all the time to somebody that's not me.
That's
You
right.
know, and it became one of the once two things happened that revolutionized polling. First, cell phones, and online, and the other was so the mode by which you reach somebody changed, and then second, the low response rates, and you combine the two, and it made polling very, very difficult.
Yeah.
But even the old school pollsters, people don't know this, but ABC's poll that they never released in 1980, they first released it beginning in 1984. In 1980, they showed Carter up by near double digits the
Yep.
entire election.
Yep.
So, I mean, Gallup's polling was often too upscale because the reality wasn't that who answered those because Gallup, for those people who don't know, used to go door to door from 1936 to 1968. I mean, in the rest, but the reality was, and they would have a lot of like door to door salesman types, but they wouldn't go into certain working class neighborhoods. I mean, it wasn't the working class people wouldn't answer the
tracks, Robert.
Yeah, exactly. There are certain places that are like, I'll just take a guess at how they're going to answer this poll. But the upscale mama at home alone. Well, yeah, I'll knock on her door, say how you doing. Especially if you know the nature of those door to door salesmen. Nature of the animal. So
may I come in for a glass of water?
Yeah, exactly. A little far. We're not doing that in the blue collar neighborhood, because if he comes home early, that's the last home you're in. So it's just the reality of how polling works, and a lot of that shift. So there's always been biases, and it's about trying to filter it out, trying to filter through the noise, but what's amazing is what we predicted a month and a half ago. Now you're seeing mainstream media polls acknowledge, betting markets catch up to, political analysts start to admit, it's starting to leak out on they're basically trying to put maximum pressure on Harris that she really needs to hit a home run tomorrow night in the debate because she's behind pretty much everywhere.
Well, let me ask you that though, because before I run this clip, because it's gonna show you, like, I mean, she is what we said a month ago, which is that she needed to come out of this convention with like an 8 to 10 point national popular vote lead, a national polling lead, folks, of 8 to 10 points. Like, by the way, like Biden had, like Hillary had. But guess what else they had? They had the snap polls telling them that they won these debates against Trump. And it didn't matter. So, like, I think, like, we're all fresh off of this Biden meltdown. Oh my God, the emperor has no clothes. He really is retarded. He's senile. Right? Like, we had this moment which just completely the bottom fell out of the Democratic candidate. And I think people are getting misled about the impact of debates on elections. Like we now have this one, but Robert, before that, we had to go back to like Reagan Carter. By the way, USA Today had Carter up the day before the election, and it said too
Oh,
close
yes.
to call Carter by 2, and then he got his ass kicked. That was the day
Lost by
before the
9.
election.
Lost by
9
9.
points. It was an 11-point miss, folks. I mean, God. But right. I mean, I feel like there's like these tiny examples. Before that, we would have to go back to JFK, Richard Nixon, say like the debate really mattered. Is
Right.
this debate really gonna matter? Like,
No.
no.
It's not. It could create, depending on how the media spins it,
Affirmation.
another response bias. You could
Another
get
response.
another 2 weeks of response bias.
Yep.
That's what all debates have created in the past. Like, I mean, I do think Harris benefits from the debate more than Trump because people have seen Trump. They pretty much
I don't know
what
why he's doing this. I don't know why he's doing
Yeah,
it.
it's not. I mean, I'll give him credit for at least
Not
holding,
smart.
not letting them change the rules because she would have spent the whole debate interrupting him, which he's a master at. But the gender dynamics would have thrown it off for him to be able to do that
Lazio.
successfully.
Yeah, Rick Lazio, folks. All right, it didn't work for him against Hillary Clinton. That was a tight race until there's a good example. Until he walked across the stage with the paper in his hand, going, "Look, madam, look," and it just was like, "Ooh, you look like a woman abuser," like, yeah. And he can't tell. You know what the media is going to do if the white old man tells talks over?
That's what they had planned on doing.
Of course.
And I think he didn't change. He didn't allow them to change the rules. I mean, we said at the time that the rules they were setting were good for Trump. They thought they were bad for Trump, but Trump is better when you externally discipline him. Right? I mean, when you cut off that mic and he has to stay disciplined, he becomes twice as good. He naturally thinks out loud with his personality, and he loves to interrupt. And he can master that with a multi-candidate debate. That's useful. Not in a one-on-one debate. It's better if he's cabined and forced to channel his energies. And he figured that out when she wanted to change the rules. He said, no, thanks.
Yeah.
But I mean, it will be only can the media gin up some sort of news story. Harris does. I mean, she's going to do better than expected to a degree because expectations are trying to set so low. I think it's also why they're willing to release honest polls at the moment. They want to be able to create.
They want to be able to artificially boost it after, of course, which it'll do now. And this is what we've been trying to explain to people now for weeks. They're not like going in there and fudging numbers the way you think they're fudging numbers. They know about the existence of the response bias, and some good, honest pollsters are doing their best. Mark Harris wrote a great piece on stratification and the quotas. It's just more expensive, folks. And I'll be honest with you. I don't think some of them know how to do it. I really don't. I think they're not those kind of pollsters. They're not very schooled in it. But let's play this thing by, you've probably seen this. And then I have another one from Harry. But we'll talk about that later because that's more granular, gets into the swing states. This one is about the miss. So before we start to compare the 2020 polls and the 24 polls, which, by the way, after talking to you, I went back and refreshed myself on some demographics from our polling at this point in 20. Holy crap. Some of this stuff I totally forgot how it looked. But we'll get to that. Just let's do this Harry Enton thing to set it up. We'll be right back. Listen to Harry.
Point out how close this race has been, consistently close. All right, campaigns where any candidate
I don't know about that, but whatever.
Led by at least 5 points in the polls. Look, most of the time there's at least some stretch where one of the candidates is ahead by at least 5 points. At least 3 weeks in which one candidate led by at least 5 points. That happened in every single campaign from 1964 to 2020. How many days have we had this campaign where one candidate was ahead by at least 5 points nationally? Look at this. 0 days. 0 days. The fact is this race has been consistently tight in a way that we have never seen before, Mr.
I got to stop him real quick before we go forward here, Robert. The fact of the matter is this is not a great, normally I don't call Harry out for this, but he's wrong here with this comparison. Okay. And I understand the point he's trying to make, but he's making it out like this race is closer than it is, number one. And number two, he's making it out like this race has always been closer than it actually was. Trump was getting ready to run away with this thing, including states like Maine, Minnesota, Oregon was going to be close. Virginia was going to go to Trump. I mean, this was going to be that bad bad of an election for Democrats. That's why they took the incredible step to remove a sitting president who won the damn primary for somebody who can't even claim they won a single primary vote in their life. But look, 1964, I think we all know that Real Clear Politics was not around in 1964. He's picking and choosing the polls that he wants to use for this little analysis. There is, in fact, multiple polls with better than their track record, better than the New York Times recent presidential election track record, better than many of these so-called high-quality polls track record. All right. That did have Trump with a 5 or more point lead consistently over Biden. It's just that it was constantly watered down by the Maris bullshit that he calls a high quality poll. It was constant, but the New York Times poll had Trump up by 6. What are you talking about? Right? It's constantly watered down by the garbage like Quinnipiac and Monmouth. It's garbage. I don't care what Nate Silver gives it on their stupid pollster scorecard. The record, the track record is all that matters. Stop being lazy, folks, and go look it up yourself. It's not that hard to see how someone performed in the prior election. All right, so I just wanted to point that out because really, Robert, that's not really true. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I would have 2 takeaways from this. One is just the 2016, 2020 polls never showed Trump up, really. So the significance of this is just that Democrats have never had the lead in 2024 that the polls claim they had in 2016 and 2020. And so right. That's the real story there. Not how close or competitive it is. And of course, you've got totally different pollsters and different polls. I mean, 1964 to 1980, you're mostly just talking about Gallup.
Yep.
You're not talking about almost no one else. Major. There was one organization sporadically that polled during that time period, but that's all. Gallup no longer polls after their miss in 2012 because they consider the polling environment too difficult to predict.
Yeah.
Gallup and even Pew stepped back from doing a lot of election polling. It got back engaged, but it's not at the same scale it used to be after 2012 because they're like, this is an impossible environment to poll in predictably. The 2 best presidential pollsters in the recent cycles.
Yeah.
Said this is too hard to do.
Yeah.
So you only really had media pollsters from 1984 forward, and they really only took off in 1988 forward. 1988 forward is when you have a bunch of, and nothing compares to the last 3 or 4 presidential cycles. I mean, we now have what?
This 10, is crazy.
Pollsters nation. This is the most pollsters ever. And the last several cycles has been the most pollsters ever. So it's not the only thing that's consequential in his analysis is that they always had Democrats with a big lead in the last 2 cycles, and now they don't, which should be a screaming red flag to anybody on the Democratic side of the aisle.
Let's play along with their little game for a second for the rest of this clip. Let's just indulge it for a second, even though I will say, this is why what Robert just said is so important too. We have too many polls and not enough pollsters. And I just wrote about this on Twitter. Like Florida Atlantic University has a scant track record. What track record they do have is not good. And yet they're dipping into every state that they could possibly imagine. You can't even poll your own state. And you're going to poll North Carolina, a state where polls have had a very difficult time in presidential elections, especially, but even in Senate races, you're going to have the balls, bro, to jump into another state when you can't do your own correctly. I think it's important that we tell people this, but let's just play along.
With the Iowa pollster. She's never been successful outside of Iowa. She's good at polling Iowa. She hasn't ever been good at polling outside of Iowa. Nate, I got into a debate with the fake Hunter Thompson guy back in 2016.
Oh my God, that guy.
I think it was 2016. It was 2016 or 2020 where she had some massive nationwide lead for the Democrats. And I was like, I'll give you 3 extra points and bet you that number's far wrong.
Yeah.
And but the real significance and uptick of what he's saying here is that past 2 presidential cycles had massive leads throughout the elections for the Democrats of 5 points or more on average. And now not a single even media poster can get Harris with a lead of 5 points or more.
Yeah. And let's listen to him say what happens if it's slightly off, because this is going to really tee up what we're going to show here. Like, there were not slight misses, folks, in 16 and 20. And I'll tell you what the average was for Trump when he's done. Here, let's let him do his little. I'm not going to play the whole thing, Robert. I'm just going to play the 1 point thing.
This is always versus never.
Correct.
That's the difference between this campaign and every other campaign we've seen for the last 75 years or so. All right, the battleground polls that we're looking at. Give us some perspective on how close they are.
Sometimes we look at these 7 close states and, you see all these numbers that are up there and you go, I can't.
This is Harris's poll margin. If they would have put Biden's up there, you would have seen nearly 10-point lead for Biden at this time in the battleground states. I just have to interrupt.
Make heads or tails of it. So I just want to sort of combine that.
That's how far behind she is, Robert.
Closest battleground states.
Yeah.
Look at the 2020 final margin and average across these 7 states. It was Biden plus 0.9 points. You don't think that could get any closer? We can, in fact, get closer. Look right now, Kamala Harris up, but get this, by just 0.6 points on average. Only.
If he was being totally honest, because I can't take it, all right? If he was being totally honest, he would have said, this is what Biden's margin actually was. Here's what Biden's poll margin was at this point. Now, here's where she is at that right now. That would have given people the totality of this situation.
And especially to look at like polls to like polls. In other words, as Trafalgar has entered the arena and Rasmussen has entered the arena and Insider Politics has entered the arena, and I know like Patriot Polls has entered the arena, and to the degree RCP or others include these in their averages, they actually deflate the actual bad bias of the media and university pollsters.
Yeah.
So you look at the average media university pollster, they showed that these states were not close in 2016 or
RCP already. This is
we know 5, 7, 10-point victories. Of course, I mean, and we highlighted some of the crazy ones. ABC, Wisconsin, Biden up 17 points.
That doesn't get Gary fired. But having Trump,
he had it the right way. If he had Trump plus 17, he would have been fired.
But for people out there who keep trying to counter me on that and saying he is still overseeing the data, they're getting the data from the Ipsos panel, which Gary never used in his entire career. Gary was a live caller pollster and then started to incorporate SMS, text messaging, and peer-to-peer. He was not ever, it never did. In all of the presidential elections you saw before, in the midterm cycle you saw last cycle, he never did this. They are choosing to use the Ipsos panel, which is important because these panels during COVID got real corrupted. You know it. We've talked about this a lot. And I pointed out last week during the show on Monday, and I pointed out when I released the poll at the end of the week last week or Thursday or whatever it was when we put the poll out. And I've been noting Trump is doing better in the live well, it's technically a live interview, but even if someone is contacted by the agent and then says, I've got the link texted, I'll take the survey online. It's called text online, folks. He's doing better in that than he is doing in the online panels because they were absolutely inflated with Zoomer liberals during COVID. And they haven't been it hasn't course corrected since these people signed up in mass during COVID to go, orange man bad, click, 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 breaking their fingers to make sure they take these polls, brother. So basically what he says, folks, is that this is where the map is now, and it shows Harris with 280 plus electoral votes. If the polls are just 1 point wrong, here's where the map goes, and it goes to Trump. And then we'll bring up some of the battleground states more specifically in a little bit. But I mean, what do you make of that? I mean, Trump's average lead, for people who don't know out there, I mean, his average on overperformance 2.7%, and 20 was more pronounced than 16, which was, honestly, a lot of those polls could claim they were in the margin, but except for some of those Pennsylvania pollsters, Fairleigh Dickinson, Franklin and Marshall, some of the ones he goes on the site right now in that clip, by the way, they sucked. I mean, they were Clinton plus 12. She lost the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, it was unbelievable bad bias. What do you think of that, though? I mean, a 1 point edge, if you were running as a Democrat, Robert, against Donald Trump, and you add a 1 point margin of error, you're going to lose. Would you not expect to lose if you were the candidate?
She's way behind. And it's what we put out my prediction, I think it was a month ago. It hasn't changed for those that, you can go back and watch those episodes, still have the same electoral college prediction. I would put the median electoral college vote for Trump at 313. I think he can get to 323 because things just keep breaking his direction. The only issue is, can they stall the momentum by creating a response bias surrounding their coverage of the debate?
Yeah.
Not what happens in the debate. That won't actually matter that much. What will matter is the media's coverage of the debate to see if they can create a response bias from the debate. Harris, having seen her debate many, many times, in a controlled, structured setting, she does better than when she's in an unstructured setting.
Yeah.
So people that are expecting her to fall flat on her face, I would not predict that. She'll do fine. She'll be mid-tier. She'll be very mid. But I wouldn't expect a knockout from Trump. I wouldn't expect anything like that. I wouldn't expect what happened in the first debate. I would expect that she does fine, and that the media hypes it as mad as they possibly can. Harris stands
fabulous. She was fabulous. 70%.
It's going to be a lot of she stood up, right? She stood up to Trump, stood up to the bully, stood up to the
bully.
Yeah, it'll be that kind of language, I presume. You can see sort of in advance how they're kind of seeding the ground for it. So I think that's what we'll see. We'll continue to see that kind of coverage, but I don't think it will give her much of a boost. I think the response bias will be 3 to 5 points. You might see her up in the polls by 3 to 5 points. Clearly, Harry's already established in the baseline. That's what they want to see her up by. They want to see her up by 5 or more. I think it'll be tough for her to get the 5 or more because the fundamentals are all with Trump. She's not in the debate. She's not going to. She just put out her plan today, finally, because she didn't want to be able to go into the debate. And Trump asked, "Where's your plan?" So she released it the night before. It's a lot of generic stuff. JD Vance goes through and takes apart some of the easy points to sort of poke at and probe at. But I don't think this. I'm curious. What do you think the ratings will be? I don't think this ratings will be as high as the last 2 cycles. But what do you think? I mean, there's a lot of people watch us streaming and online now, so that throws a whole curveball into the conventional TV ratings. But do you think we'll get, a 90 million, 100 million, something like that? I mean, how many people do you think are going to end up watching?
I think that people are starting to come back from Labor Day. You have parents who have their kids going back to school. I feel like in this last poll, man, there were people who, it was certainly less of a response bias than it was before, although we kind of also learned from the first poll with Harris in the race. So, that helps. But I really just feel like there are a lot of people, that are just done. They know how they're going to vote. And that's it. And it's the pollsters not really showing that. So, they're making it look like there are these swings and there isn't. And they really already know. And so what does that mean? I feel like a lot of people, I could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of people are just going to kind of skip it, man. Let me be honest. If you didn't do this for a living, would you watch it?
Oh, absolutely not.
Me?
It just screams boring.
I'm just over it, dude. Yeah. Right. Because this is not a
Trump's a known animal. I get Harris is still relatively unknown, so maybe that will amongst a lot of your normies.
It's possible.
So maybe they'll tune in. I'll be curious about the real ratings. There'll be bogus polls afterwards. CNN always does a bogus poll after the debate and usually has Democrat winning by huge margin by 30 points, so they can build the narrative. So we'll see if they do that sort of thing. The problem isn't. Harris gains just by being on the same stage with Trump, because she's a relative unknown. So the new candidate always benefits from being on the presidential debate stage. Trump benefited in 2016. All he had to be was normal. Biden benefited in 2020. He just had to not collapse. So Harris just needs not to have a major gaffe. And she'll come out more positive from the debate in terms of public perception. But it's not going to – is it going to change how the economy is? Is it going to change the problem of the border? Is it going to change the problem of war overseas? No. It's not going to change any of those 3. And people are acknowledging, like the Michigan media pollsters that have historically always underpolled Trump. They were always predicting, those Detroit media networks have always been showing Trump down 7, down 8, down 10, down 12, both 2016, 2020. They now have it tied or even up.
Yeah, he's up.
Thinking of the numbers, it's the same. It's the same thing that your numbers show when you look at you push the undecideds. You ask them what issues motivate them, and it's the economy, it's immigration, it's inflation. I did like this question. This might be something to throw in down the road. I was trying to figure out, how do you phrase the war question? Because there was the post-election one that's done by the people at the University of Michigan. That that we have a lot of data on. They have certain war ones that are good. But the way they asked it in Michigan was something to the effect of, which president do you think will make you feel more safe? And I was like, that's a creative way to ask that question, because that's a way to get to the war question and the domestic crime question, et cetera.
Even financial stability in that question, you know, like
Yeah, exactly. You have all of it.
Oh.
And it's like, that's a smart way to frame it, I think. It'd be interesting to tease that out to see if that captures the zeitgeist.
We should do it. Last and this, I guess, a good segue into the comparing polls from 2020. I mean, we could start with mine. I was going to start with the New York Times, but we asked them, you know, basically which candidate, or, you know, did you think would start a new, or was most likely to get the U.S. engaged in another conflict, a new war, you know, and the results were weird in Pennsylvania and in Ohio and in Iowa. It was like, oh God, Biden. You know, like, you know, hands down. But in Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, right? For some reason, these people thought that it was more likely. I mean, not for some reason. We know what the reason is, but that it was more likely that Trump would get the U.S. involved in a new foreign conflict.
Right.
Look, you have these, and you're going to hear even the normies are going to hear about the Dick Cheney endorsement of Kamala Harris. The new normies are going to hear about all these people. Like, they are officially the party of war now. So in the minds of people, I don't know how you hear like Dick Cheney is backing Kamala Harris. The Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Pentagon want Harris to win. Like, you can't get away with those headlines. Everyone knows Dick Cheney. I mean, they were calling for him to be executed at The Hague, brother. I mean, this is who these people are. They went from executing Dick Cheney to thinking it's a covetous endorsement or something, like, just insane. But some of these,
according to Bernie Sanders, he cares about democracy.
a socialist.
Isn't that why we went to war? Isn't that why we went to war for democracy?
Yeah.
But that Michigan poll,
that's the original excuse from the left.
When asked undecideds who they trusted more on immigration,
Oh,
on their top issues, immigration,
Yeah.
inflation, jobs, the economy. And
Yeah.
the third one was who makes you feel more safe. Trump had huge double-digit leads in Michigan in a poll that historically understates Trump's support.
Glenn Gariff Group, which is doing it for Detroit News now, because Epic MRA is doing it for the other one, whatever it is. Like, you have these two native pollsters, folks, Glenn Gariff and Epic MRA, and then Mitchell Research, but he does campaigning polls too, so he doesn't always. He used to do he may do it again. He used to do a tracking poll that's kind of like public and separate from the other work he does. He always understated Trump's support. They all did, all three of them. But these two that are out for the news outlets now, both have Trump by one now. Glenn Gariff Group had written about the +6 they had over Biden before he dropped out. And they made the case like, look, it is important to compare results from the prior election to now, especially apples to apples. We've never had Trump up. We never had him up against Hillary Clinton. We never had him up against Joe Biden. And while it's like not a given, I don't know how you could ignore the fact that we now have him up. And now again, here they are again, Trump +1 over Harris. Folks, these are people that gave Biden and Clinton big leads in Michigan before the election. Let's start, speaking of which, Michigan, let's start with the Midwest, because this is one of the things that I got to bring up. Here's our poll from this week. We asked multiple different ballot scenarios, you know, head to head with someone else, and then the minus RFK, of course, the full ballot, and with leaners and without first, of course, and then with leaners. Here is the full ballot where Trump is up in 2 of the 3 scenarios, and they're basically tied because it's so close, but he is up a little bit. And Harris is up in the 1, which is with a generic someone else. I find that to be the least accurate gauge when I go back and look at my old polling, because it doesn't give people the real world example. So in order to compare, Robert, that 2020 polling we did with this one now, we have to use the full ballot scenario because it was a full ballot when we did it in 2020, right? And you guys can see here when you lean people, actually Cornel West is running ahead of Jill Stein, very close to Chase Oliver. But I mean, they're all so close. Trump is up by a little bit, 46.9 to 46.7. Chase Oliver's got 1.3. West has 1.2. Jill Stein is 0.8. And I think a lot of you know what people are 3.1. And when you tighten the voter screen, that actually falls down, that someone else falls to almost nothing. And Trump actually bumps up a little bit, which is a difference. He was doing worse in the likely voter model against Biden, Robert. Now he's doing better. Same thing with the New York Times poll, by the way. You know, before she was the nominee and Biden was still in, Trump was winning in both cases, but Biden would gain a few points in the likely voter model. That is not the case anymore, just as it's not the case that Trump was winning and then with the undecideds, they leaned to Biden and Biden would kind of like close the gap, not enough to catch up, and Trump was still winning. This is different. They're both very close. Maybe Harris is a teeny little lead until you lean, and then that lead is gone, and Trump overtakes her because now the undecideds are decidedly going for Donald Trump. All right, which is just very interesting to me. And by the way, when you look at the social bias, it just screams that actually we are probably going to understate his support, because those people who go someone else, or I don't know, Robert, or they're Trumpers in there. There are Trumpers in there. And I can show people that if we have enough time. But look at, for instance, the 18 to 29. Initially, when you do the head-to-head, Trump is a little bit higher with them, but leaned and done 52 to 38 Harris with those who are 18 to 29. If you look at the detail, you can actually see that 25 to 29, again, is the source of her lead with 18 to 29. And that's probably because those people, well, not probably, it's because they're more educated, right, than the 18 to 24 category. All right, so that's where her lead is coming from. If we go back and look at Biden's from the big data poll in 2020, Biden's lead, dude, he was up 50 to 28. So Trump is got more than, because when you lean, it's about there. He's up 10 points with this group in support alone. 10 points. And she's down a little. Well, no, she's roughly even from where Biden ended up, you know. So and Biden, what happened actually with this age group, folks? We did get Trump's pretty much on the money. Biden winded up taking those undecideds that you can see. Actually, I don't have those crosstabs up, but undecided was 13.7 at this time, at the end of August, early September, which was the closest that I could find. We did another poll, obviously, too, but it wasn't at this moment. This is a lot. This is, of course, we're leaning people here. So those people lean, that 13.7 lean to Biden. He wound up winning that group 60 to 36. So we were very close to Trump's. Like, we actually, you know, obviously Trump got some of them, but he got creamed, right? So she is running 8 points behind Joe Biden in the 18 to 29, and Trump is running 10 points ahead of himself. And if you can, and just so people know, man, let me show the crosstab just so people know. Here is the comparable crosstab from 2020 when we did this at the end of August in 2020. All right. I know it's small, but here's the 18 to 29 column right here that I'm highlighting. And you can very clearly see that Biden-Harris ticket had a significant lead over the Trump-Pence ticket with 18 to 29. Man, I mean, that's number one. You know, we can move on to the Midwest, where I have to pull my screen down so I can show people how it was at this point in the Midwest. We did the Rust Belt poll. We did the entire Midwest. But before I do that, what do you think about this younger age bracket? Because just to give everybody the rest of it, Trump is ahead 48 to 45 with those who were 30 to 44. He was down 45 to 35 at this point in 2020. He's also ahead with the 45 to 64 category, and he's got it like it's like 48.4 to 45.6. He was barely down, but he was down. Biden had 45.1, he had 44.8, and then he was leading with seniors by a little bit more than he's leading now, but I mean, not that big of a trade-off. So it all comes from below the age of 65. I mean, what do you make of this? I mean, it's huge, man. It's huge. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's what we've been talking about now for 2 years, was that the group that was shifting politically are millennials and Zoomers. And like, there were some people last week who didn't understand why we, highlighted certain areas with, about raw milk. It was just to highlight that there are as many people who care about raw milk as there are marijuana in the United States.
Yeah.
And Democrats recognize, put marijuana on the ballot, you'll win a bunch of votes. I mean, it probably helped. I mean, Do you think Democrats win Arizona? Wasn't it a pot on the ballot in 2020 in Arizona?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they win Arizona if pot's not on the ballot. Because it brings out a single issue voter. But what is it? There's overlap for these voters. Interestingly enough, I mean, demographically, the voter group most interested in legalizing pot is also the ones most interested in legalizing milk, raw milk. The point is to highlight that there's shift amongst these groups. These groups don't think like boomers. They're not boomers in the mindset.
They're farm to table. They don't need the government to tell them when the hell they can buy a gallon of milk or when they want to get whatever they want to eat, man. They are a farm. They're like, that's the phrase in every state, by the way, for like these school programs. It's called farm to table. All right.
Completely. And I mean, similar with medical freedom, they're disproportionately discriminated against related to the vaccine, disproportionately know somebody who suffered a serious injury, disability, or death from the vaccine.
Yeah.
So it's these for the last 2 years, working class young people, minorities and millennials, but and Zoomers have been dropping off, have been divorcing from the Democratic Party. Now, they haven't married the Republican Party, but they have been divorcing from the Democratic Party. And all Trump needed to do to reach out to them was, one, remind them of the success of his first term economically. And in terms of, with Trump, you have peace abroad, prosperity at home. Biden and Harris, you have war abroad and poverty at home. You can just hammer those issues over and over and over again, for which immigration is a useful central fulcrum because it raises the issues of both safety and the issues of the economy, taking jobs, costing money, et cetera, just like the foreign wars do. And so been saying that all Trump's got to do is reach that voter group. And part one was remind them of his first term compared to Biden. And second, is to reach out to the Kennedy voter group because they overwhelmingly made up who were considering Kennedy. 5% voting for Kennedy, but 30% considering Kennedy. And that voter group was the key voter group to win in this election. And Trump, by uniting with Kennedy, adding Tulsi Gabbard, adding Elon Musk, doing the podcast circuit, publicly talking about how he's going to do these things related to public health, do these things related to transparency, do these things related to free speech, do these things related to Kennedy assassination records and Epstein files and so forth, is the group he is most motivating is that young group. And we've been saying that as long as he reaches out to him, he seals that group up that doesn't want to vote for Harris, he's in. And that's what he's done over the last 6 weeks. Now, the only people who haven't directly targeted that group are Republican candidates for the House, Republican candidates for the Senate, and Republican candidates for state office. Yeah. Those are the ones who I noticed in your polling data. It's the same groups, younger voters, Hispanic voters. They're the ones dropping off from Trump to undecided down ballot. Yep. And the reason why we highlighted the raw milk issues is just one of many issues they can find. And there's two ways about this. One part is these people really, really care about these issues far more than Joe Schmuck or the Matt Walsh of the world understand. That's part one. But part two is it signals your independence. It signals your anti-establishment. It signals you're different, right? It becomes a proxy issue. Sometimes it's not about the issue, but it's how the issue helps them filter and frame who you are as a candidate. So, Trump being on podcasts, endorsing Robert Kennedy, talking about all these issues further reinforces he's a disruptor. Now, he benefited from all the criminal lawfare against him because that reinforced he was an underdog. That reinforced he was a disruptor. That reinforced he was anti-establishment. But the Senate candidates and the House candidates and the gubernatorial candidates and the state legislative candidates need to do the same. If they are smart in all of these states, these issues are hot issues. Find a couple of them that they can, whether it's medical freedom or whether it's food freedom or political freedom, financial freedom, like Bitcoin. Trump reaching out to Bitcoin signaled, okay, this guy's not just some old boomer from New York City, right? This guy's hip. This guy's cool. This guy's got it. This guy understands. This guy's an outsider. This guy's an underdog. This guy's anti-establishment. This guy is change. It was one of the points you were highlighting that, one of the advantages Trump has in this election that he didn't in 2020 is he is, like he was in 2016, the change candidate in an electoral environment where people want change. Yeah. So the Republican Senate candidates, Republican House candidates need to find a way to brand themselves by picking a distinct, unique issue that stands them out separate and independent from the institutional generic Republican brand. Yeah. And if they do, that they can surge, that they could win. They could pick up 5, 6, 7, 8 Senate seats.
And they can hold that puppy for a long time.
20, 25 House seats. I mean, they could give Trump a real safe majority. But right now, they're not doing it. And because they're not doing it is why they're lagging so far behind Trump.
So the New York, before I move on to the region numbers here, and I'm just going to focus on the one region that matters so much and why it's a huge deal. The New York Times poll, which I meant to start comparing to as well, was 58-30 among 18 to 29-year-olds. And we wound up getting roughly near that number in our final poll. We had Trump, however, at 32.7. That is where he ended up in our polling with 18 to 29-year-olds, and Biden ended up at 57 something. So we got very close. The New York Times was pretty close. That's not the demographic that they blew the worst. They blew seniors the worst, which we'll get to in a second here. But moving on to the Midwest, Robert. Okay. Huge deal right here. At this time in 2020, we not only did a poll for the Epoch Times, but we did the Rust Belt poll as well. And I'm going to read you the margin. Biden was ahead in the Midwest without leaners, 46.7 to 40.7. Trump wound up winning the Midwest in the exit polls, and I think the voter validated surveys by like 2 points overall. That's it. Was not enough. The New York Times poll, I'll give you before we give our margin. Oh man, it's something. Here it is. Biden 48, Trump 43. So very close again to what we found in August. That's the New York Times final, so everyone knows. In August, however, that's where we were. And now you can see where we are today, where Trump has a healthy 3 times the vote lead that he actually had in 2020, 50 to 44. Folks, I mean, we had Biden up at this point in the Midwest. Among those who were most enthusiastic and most likely to vote, it was closer. And Biden led by a little over 2 points. However, he was still ahead in the New York Times poll. He ended ahead by 5. We had him, we had Trump about where he was. He had like a very statistically insignificant lead in our final poll. This is not statistically insignificant. This is a healthy lead and 3 times the size of the lead that he ended up with in 2020 when he lost the Midwest by a couple. I mean, he lost Wisconsin, folks, by like 0.6%. Now, I mean, tens of thousands of votes, not even. He lost Pennsylvania by, I believe, less than a point, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And he lost Michigan by like 2 and a little over 2. So this kind of movement is a clean sweep. I'm trying to explain that to people. So when Glenn Gariff has Trump up by 1 in Michigan, and, Epic MRA has him up by 1 in Michigan, but then you see like the shitty Bloomberg News poll, which is done by the Morning Consult. I mean, you gotta take, you gotta compare apples to apples. You really do. Like that's the way this should be done. And if it was one demographic, okay. But now this is our second one, and I'm going to keep going here. This is not going to be the last example I use. Race is next. And it's amazing to me how close the New York Times is, Robert, with our polling. And they had Trump up by 1. Now the New York Times has Trump. Where are you? I just scrolled down looking at something else stupidly. Hold on 1 second. Let me get back up. Now the New York Times has Trump up in the Midwest. Where are you? Oh, that's the leaners. Here we go. Without leaners, 51 to 42. With leaners, by the way, it is, I mean, it's a similar margin. So bottom line is, again, more than 3 times in the New York Times poll, more than 3 times the margin he actually won the Midwest by in 2020, a stark reversal from when they had him down 5 points going into 2020. We never really had that mistake, that error that the New York Times had. So again, that's why it's so important to be apples to apples. And yet we're both ending up in the same place, in the same general, I don't know what they're going to do in their next poll, man. But I think you're right. This is the current state of the race, folks, or very close to it. She better do well next week, or she's done. And that's what I think the New York Times is signaling to everybody, that if she doesn't perform well, she's cooked.
Yeah, I mean, and they're signaling to the media how hard and heavy they need to push in the post-debate narrative for Harris.
Because that's who
because that's just the way of their. I mean, they'll probably be back to Harris up by 4 or 5, something like that. Their next poll would be my guess. But what it shows, I mean, you really have 4 groups deciding the election. The 3 groups we've talked a lot about: working class minorities and millennials and Zoomers. The shift of Black and Hispanic voters in general, but the other group that is shifting is, and it only needed a small shift, is the heart of farming America, the heart of industrial America, and a part of the country that, due to its ancestry, is traditionally anti-war or war skeptical. The Robert Taft, the Ohio Republican isolationist, came from Ohio. Not a coincidence. Wisconsin, notoriously anti-war state. The Midwest has had a trend towards that direction, towards skepticism of war, dislike of domestic chaos, and a preference for building up American agriculture and industry at home. And those issues are the issues where the Biden-Harris administration has failed the most. And those are the issues where Trump is naturally the strongest. And this is where his choice of Vance was critical, because it reinforced that message to the working class Midwesterners, that by picking a working class Midwesterner on the ticket, not a fake one like Walsh, but a real one like J.D. Vance. And so consequently, that's why it's trended that way. And then why what's trending in the Sun Belt is trending its direction is the shift of working class minority, millennials, and Zoomers, particularly Black and Hispanic voters of a younger age generation that have grown skeptical of the Democratic Party due to its failed promises of the Biden-Harris regime. And they thought identity politics alone would bring those voters back, when those voters really aren't driven by identity politics, and never were. And that was just a miscue and a mistake made by them. So that's why she's in such a difficult conundrum. That, practically speaking, if you were looking at it, there's if I was on the Democratic side, I would just avoid the floor falling in. I wouldn't think I could win this election, because you have to cheat the odds to do so.
I mean, Robert, let's break down the Midwest for a second, because we have census divisions here before I move on to race, which I want to do, because again, I mean, it's unbelievable how close the New York Times got to our polling. Which, by the way, doesn't usually happen. I think Robert's right about what they'll do after the debate, but we'll see what happens with us. Look at the lead in the West North Central division. Oh my God, 53-43. And then even in the more difficult Mid-Atlantic, which is not technically the Midwest, it is part of, you have Pennsylvania in there, so part of the Rust Belt, but East North Central, 49-45. I mean, man, this is not close. That's not close. I'm sorry. It's not. If you were to break it down in 2020, you're going to see Biden actually leading in West North Central, by the way, and he led pretty decently. I mean, it's 53-46. So this is a complete, more than a reversal. It's more than a reversal. He leads by 10 now. Whoops, I had the wrong thing up. More than a reversal, Robert.
Well, the other thing I noticed is, the tracking the English vote, which used to be called the Yankee vote, was another way that Kevin Phillips and others called. Ancestral vote that you can read about in Kevin Phillips. And what's interesting about that is that would tell me whether or not Trump really is capable of stealing Maine, New Hampshire.
Yeah,
There's
right.
also an above-average Yankee vote in Michigan.
Yes.
He disproportionately fell off with that vote in 2020, which was showing up actually in your survey. So how is he doing now with the people who identify their ancestry? And if you think about it, what kind of snob says their ancestry is English? You know what I mean? I get the Yankees, but my favorite ancestry is still American. But it's your old school English, old school Yankee vote. Used to be the heart of the Republican Party until the 1960s, then became the heart of the Democratic Party in certain areas and sectors. But it's how the English vote will tell you whether Maine, New Hampshire, and Michigan, where they're overrepresented compared to the rest of the Midwest, what Trump's odds are there. So how is that compared to 2020?
So let's check it out. So here we have, and I would tell folks to ignore some of the smaller ones, the smaller Italian, Polish, Russian, Scott Irish, all of that, even Norwegian, until we do the Rust Belt poll. The sample is just going to be too small. But in a national survey, you're going to get people who identify as American, and you're going to get people who identify as English. In 2020, Trump usually led among those who identified as American, between 52-48, 53-47. He now leads among those who say they're American, which is the counter to the English group, which I'll get to in a second. He leads with them 57.3 to 38.2, which is an absolute blowout. But then when you look at those silk stocking Republicans who are, turned on Trump in 2020 to some degree, and, there are Erie County, by the way, still has those English Yankee identifying groups. They're certainly in the southeastern part of Pennsylvania, even, by the way, folks, in the northeast of Pennsylvania, where Trump runs well, in Pike, Luzerne, Lackawanna, and those areas. For a Republican, he runs well. In Michigan, also, Robert's 100% correct. You will get a lot of these people who identify as English. Northwestern Wisconsin, when they're not Scandinavian, they will say they are English. And Trump actually, this blew me away. Trump leads with this group 52 to 40.5. That is exactly what he was losing it by, almost exactly what he was losing it by to Biden in 2020. So when we think about Scranton, PA, right, where did Biden run well, Robert? Like that, you can't take it away from him.
Well, he did better with the English and the Swedes everywhere. It's why Minnesota wasn't as close. It's why parts of South Dakota trended for Biden. But the Yankee problem was the big problem in Maine. New Hampshire, Maine was much closer in 2016 than it was in 2020. New Hampshire was much closer in 2016 than it was in 2020. Michigan did better than for Trump. He won it 2016 than 2020. But if he was going to flip that Yankee vote back, then that means it's game. That's why Kamala Harris is up in New Hampshire.
Yeah, no kidding. Let's cut the crap for a second. She's over there trying to supposedly shore up and boost down ballot candidates. $25 million donating from a presidential campaign to down ballot candidates is nothing. She is not going to New Hampshire and Minnesota because she's trying to, basically push these people who might have a chance to topple a Republican. That is a load of crap. She is there because it is too close, or she's down. That's really what it comes down to. The polling, I have not seen Minnesota internal Democratic polling in weeks. But when they had her starting to, in public polls, starting to win Minnesota by above 5, that was not the case in their own polling. She was ahead by only 2 points, and it wasn't even a full 2 points. It was 1.8, if I remember correctly. So it did, at first, I'm always skeptical with it. I'm skeptical with New Hampshire. You know how I feel about the damn state. Live free or die can throw you for a loop as a pollster. I don't like polling New Hampshire. I just don't. They mess with you. They throw, they really throw a monkey, a monkey wrench in your thing, bro. And I just kind of steer clear of it if I can. This is not unbelievable given the ethnicity numbers. It's just not. That's who these voters are. And
it also explained parts of New York and New Jersey.
Absolutely.
Upstate New York has a
Monmouth
big
County,
English
New Jersey. Monmouth, folks, Monmouth County, New Jersey. That white native who didn't like the migration of Italians from the 5 boroughs to Freehold or Howell Township. That's your English silk stocking Republican. Okay. Marlboro Township, folks. Think about those areas. If you're from this if you're from this state, Laura and I went to the wedding. I don't know if I ran this by you last time we were on the show, but I couldn't believe, I couldn't believe the neighborhoods that were just so pro-Trump everywhere, signs everywhere, rallies, gatherings, little mini rallies. It was ridiculous. They were everywhere from working class neighborhoods that are certainly more mixed race to the silk stocking neighborhoods where you don't expect that to be the case anymore. So now I believe it. And by the way, look at the Mid-Atlantic. Let me put that up real quick. Back to region because division, because we did just kind of jump over it. 49.6, bro, to 44.3. That should not be happening. You know, even New England, she's only ahead 51.8 to 39.9. Dude, Biden was crushing him. And it was like 62 to 31 in 2020 in New England, folks. He was crushing Donald Trump in those areas. She is not at all performing at these levels. Not even close. Not even close.
Yeah, and it explains why they have more trouble in more places than expected. That the Yankee vote dropping off means they have to defend the Northeast and the Upper Midwest in ways they were hoping they would not have to, and they're already behind in the Sun Belt. And there's no way you want her campaigning in New Hampshire unless you're in serious trouble in New Hampshire.
Break, dude. Give me a break. That state, for 3 straight Senate races that Republicans thought were competitive, it screwed them on. Ironically, Trump did think he could win New Hampshire in 2016. He did not want to give it up the way some of his advisors were saying to give it up. And I know him and Corey Lewandowski had a lot of conversations about it. Like, look, Corey was saying, look, yes, there's been a lot of migration from Massachusetts, and there's been a lot of new liberals coming in. It's not the same state it was. But guess what? There are a ton of native New Hampshire voters who don't like it. They don't like it. So you come in here banging the drum about immigration and trade, and they're going to vote for you. And he did. He believed it. He stuck with it. And that was, he didn't do that in 2020. Also, this is, I know, a little bit off topic, but you brought up issues before, and I didn't say it. I meant to. This month, abortion got bumped out of third again, back into fourth. So you now have inflation and cost of living, number 1, general economy and jobs, number 2, and immigration and border security, number 3. And abortion is like way back there, brother, way back there. Did I put that in here, by the way? Yeah, here it is. It's not way back there, but it's way back from where it was. There it is. As you can see, immigration and border security have now taken the 3rd place spot again. I think you're going to have some like really intense people that are picking that. You can still tell that there's a lot of black women who are picking abortion. They are liberals for sure. But there's also a chunk, like 1 out of 10, who absolutely can't stand illegal immigration. And 1 out of 10 is a big deal when you're trying to win 15% or 20%. Speaking of race, getting back to the election itself. Here we go. Trump up with the white vote about what he won it by in 2020. Basically right there, which is a problem because he overperforms with white voters. The New York Times poll in 2020, folks, had Trump winning the white vote by only 6 points, 50 to 44. In this latest New York Times poll, Trump is winning the white vote by 15, 56 to 41. So very close to ours. She's at 40.8. Very close to ours. And we have him at 54. They have him a little bit higher. Black voters. Let's look at this. In 2020, the New York Times. Oh, and by the way, let me just get our own poll. Whites were Trump 40 at this point. He goes up a little bit in our final, but at this point, Trump 49, Biden 39. So basically a 10-point lead, but him slightly below 50. And then in our poll for black voters, again, 19%, because black men are just not going back to the Democrat. In 2020, the New York Times poll had Trump at 4% of the black vote. We had him at this time at 12% of the black vote, according to exit polls anyway. That's exactly what he won, 12%. Some of the other voter validating surveys have him at 10. 9, 2. There's 2 of them. One is at 10, one is at 9. But we did not dramatically overstate his black support, Robert, and yet consistently. And by the way, where's the New York Times this month? They are at, where are you? 14%. Really very close. Subgroups, sampling errors for subgroups are higher. So very, very close to where we have him. Even if he got 14%, Robert, and they were right, that's 10 points, or not even. Let's just say this. He's up 10 points with black voters in the New York Times poll from 2020 to now. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly. And almost all of it's coming from younger generations.
Of course, and particularly under the age of 45, actually, because I went and looked, and people can go and check race by gender and of course race by age. But I'll nest the age detail after the show today for people who want to go and check that out, because then you can really break down and see the difference between white 18 to 24s and 18 and 25 to 29s, and black 18 to 24s and 25 to 29s. Black 25 to 29s are not as educated as white 25 to 29s. So there's a disparity there that's going to jump right out at you. And then Hispanics. I mean, this is the full ballot. So we have them just below 40. In the head-to-head, we have them in the 40s. And then with the generic third party, someone else like the New York Times poll did, we have them at 41. The New York Times poll has them at 41. And where did we have them in 2020, by the way? We had them at 31.7 nationally at this point in 2020. So he's literally up 10 points with Hispanics. And Biden, by the way, we had, he was crushing them. Biden was already at 55%. In the New York Times poll, Biden was at 50-30. So, I mean, you guys see the pattern here. You know what I'm saying? Like, you see the pattern here. Without leaners, by the way, with Biden. Without leaners. He was at the margin she's at now. Or not at the margin, excuse me. At the level of support that Harris is at now. I mean.
And I think it's pretty close to what numbers I put out about a month ago with each demographic group.
Actually, I could pull that up if you want. Yeah, it is. It's about what, 2 or 3 points under? Something like that? Yeah. I mean, give it time.
Pretty close in terms of the age, the racial groups, the economic groups. You could just see it trending in this direction due to all the reasons why these voter groups were moving the way they were moving, and that's where Trump Trump's got to do is just keep on doing what he's doing. I mean, to continue to campaign in alignment with Kennedy on those issues, and continue to hammer away how that's the other problem with we're not going back. And it was great to see J.D. Vance start to hammer this the other day on the stump. Yeah. He's like, "What do you mean we're not going? You don't want to go back to actually low inflation? You don't want to go back to actually good jobs? You don't want to go back to the world being safe? You don't want to go back to your Haitian illegal immigrant neighbor trying to steal your cat so they can eat it? So of all the illegals to let in, Venezuelan gangs, Haitians. These are like the groups that are really not going to blend in to local society in a way that makes you feel good about your neighbor. I think Savannah Hernandez had a fun. The Haitian guy just like carrying a geese just right down the street to eat, or whatever it was. It's like, what the heck? They do things a little different down there. That you talk about not blending in. Wow. I mean, what a shock. So, this is only going to get worse. The Venezuelan gang story, they've just touched the very tip of that iceberg. They're a ruthless organization that exceeds in their violence MS-13 or any other gang. It's kind of this way the Albanians took over the human trafficking trade about 30 years ago. Yeah. They're more violent, more vicious, more nasty than everybody else. And that's how this tiny little country and this tiny little criminal operation managed to replace global mafias and organized crime units in a particular traffic or trade. And the Venezuelans used it as an example. The Venezuelan government decided to thank the United States for intervening by sending him right up here to the United States, released him from prison, gave him a free ticket, said, go up to America. And what they're doing is this is how they operate. They go into different communities. They're more vicious and violent than everybody else, and they take over the entire operation wherever they can find vulnerability or susceptibility. I mean, we could have a serious gang war in Chicago. I mean, because if they keep going in there with the Mexican drug cartels and the various gangs aligned with various parts of the Black community, Crips, others, etc., then you could have a whole new set of nightmare problems. And that's what, like, everything on the horizon points to worse situations. I mean, the economy's getting worse, not better. The risk of World War III keeps rising, not decelerating. And the illegal immigration issue keeps intensifying and amplifying, not diminishing. So there's really, I know they're going to put a lot of pressure on Netanyahu to try to do a ceasefire so they can stop bleeding Jewish and Muslim votes in urban centers like Minneapolis, like Detroit, like some other places, worried about some down ballot races in places like New York and New Jersey. because they can't keep. I mean, in Dearborn, they really can't afford to lose all the Arab votes. But right now, they're losing Arab and Jewish votes. So you combine losing Arab and Jewish votes with losing English votes, with losing the working class millennials and Zoomers, with drops in support amongst Black voters, and with a mindset shift amongst Midwestern voters. It's hard to see how they're going to compete in the Midwest.
Yeah, I wanted to pull up this. I mean, Trump we have at 35% with the Jewish vote, all right, which is down from the last Biden poll. But that was Biden. But it's still above the 32% that he's accustomed to getting. And oh, by the way, in our poll in 2020, because I do have and where is it? I have religion right here. We had him at like 24% of the Jewish vote. So we actually underestimated him. So
I was going to say, and there's multiple surveys now that show leakage of the Jewish vote.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's what that threat was last couple of weeks or a month ago or so, after Trump met with Netanyahu about Trump being under investigation for a Logan Act violation. That was just an intimidation effort towards Netanyahu to try to coerce him to do a peace. They think in the administration that their October surprise of a ceasefire in Israel could ameliorate both the Jewish and Muslim votes for the Democratic Party and make Biden and Harris look good for a last surge. Because I mean, Russiagate 3.0 is not going anywhere. That was a waste of energy. That drop of news of an indictment,
because it just I mean, people saw right through it, I think, immediately, man. So they gave up on it. But let's not jump past the Haiti thing too fast. I got to bring up something real quick. It's a little bit of a flashback. Listen, this isn't advocacy. This is just the truth, folks. This is just the truth. All right. This was Kamala Harris talking. Let me just let Kamala Harris say what she's going to say.
That is why also, starting with our administration, we gave TPS, temporary protected status, to Haitian migrants, 55,000. And then more recently, we extended temporary protected status to over 100,000 Haitian migrants for that very reason, that they need support, they need protection. That is why also.
And this is why also that liberal cat ladies need to rethink their support for Kamala Harris. All right. Unless they want Fluffy to end up in someone's pot of stew. Okay. Right. This
is the kind of visceral, visual significance of a problem, right? How do you translate something that everybody can connect to, relate to, understand, appreciate? That the Haitians are coming for your pets because they would like them on the dinner table is something that people can because it's so crazy and yet it's so true.
And yet it's true.
Of all the people that let in, it's like the Haitians. I mean, God, well, Haiti is just not. I mean, it's a different world down there, and it's the God bless them and everything. But you don't want to bring in 100,000 plus Haitians and drop them off in Middle America. That's just going to be. You're talking about seismic culture shock. Holy moly! It's almost as bad as the Venezuelan gangs. The Haitians are notoriously for violence. I mean, it's because of what happened and how that whole culture developed with the slave rebellion. The slavery itself was unbelievably violent. It led to a lot of things. The Clintons, of course, did a number on Haiti that's going to last for decades. They look like Napoleon on that. So I think it's another example, another illustration where they don't have it. And I think if Trump's tomorrow, the key points for him, I think, are a couple of. She's going to use the convicted line over and over again. With the prosecutor one, and he should compare himself. They should prep him with a couple of good examples of cases where she wrongfully prosecuted innocent people. Several of them, by the way, black men that she knew were innocent, and she left them in prison for over a year despite demands by the courts to release them.
Yes,
to continue to use them as slave labor for the state and the corporations that donated money to her.
That is what ended her campaign in 2020 when she tried to play the prosecutor role up on the stage. Oh, I'm, by the way, I'm super, I'm super sympathetic to all of these new movements, Black Lives Matter, defund the police. But, I know when to prosecute crime because, I was a prosecutor and I know when it's time to be to be merciful, and I know when it's time to not. And Tulsi just ended her, and she ended her with the truth, which is what was so bad about that. Because the fact of the matter is, you cannot sit up there as someone who was raised, by the way, in Canada, as a privileged Indian woman, not as a black woman who was not privileged in the United States. All right, let's cut it for a second. And you threw black men and brown men in jail, and you kept people in prison that you knew were innocent because your textbook Martha Coakley kind of shit, where it's like, and for those who don't know what I'm talking about, she was the Mitt Romney beat her when she was running for governor, but she kept also some similar situations, keeping people in prison so she could pretend later to be tough on crime when she runs for higher office. These are people who knew that these defendants were innocent, and they did it as a political stunt. I mean, I'm not sure there's any worse than that, Robert. Like, I'm not sure. I'm not.
I think it provides two bridges for Trump. One bridge
So
is if she brings up the convicted, all the other stuff, you can say, I didn't always understand what it's like to be wrongfully prosecuted. I didn't always understand what it's like for these innocent people to be railroaded, but now I do. And I feel like, and he can name, this person who you wrongfully imprisoned and legally kept there for years to boost your political campaign and help your corporate donors. And then he could also transition to issues like marijuana, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the issue where he's got an edge on it. It's like, while you're running around trying to lock up every little kid
for nickel,
over truancy or over these minor issues, while you're letting real dangerous criminals, illegal immigrants out on the street to rape, assault, and murder, I think that we should decriminalize marijuana, not put all these kids in jail. We got bigger problems like all the Venezuelan gangs you're letting into the country, right? Yeah. It's a great way to appeal directly to those working class minorities and millennials to show you're different, you're distinct, your approach, that she's the nasty corporatist, statist, prosecutor, oppressor, and he's the populist outsider who understands the underdog, no matter who that underdog may be in whatever situation they may be, while continuing to be a law and order guy because he's going to protect the border. That the problem isn't some kid doing some weed out back behind school. The problem is the Venezuelan gang taking over an entire apartment complex. The problem is Haitians who like to walk around with their machetes and put people's heads on stakes, and when they're not busy trying to eat your cat. So I mean, that's the that I would go bam, 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 bam. And come up with a few visceral visual moments that even the media can't get away from. Like I would be tempted with why I would use that clip. Say, you were proud of bringing in 155,000 Haitians that you didn't properly vet, and now they're running around trying to steal grandma's cat. What's wrong with you? Some image that. Something that's viral, that's easily that the media, even though they may be angry at him saying, it becomes the defining moment. I would focus on those constellation of issues because that's the voter group that's going to decide the election.
Listen, as distracting as you may be, David, at least he did text me I can't stand when people text me during the shows. They know I can't stand it. It's like a pet peeve of mine. All right. But he is giving me some breaking news that is pretty important. So the Michigan Supreme Court, because of course they are corrupt and liberal, just put RFK back on the ballot. Unbelievable. These people are the trashiest people on planet Earth. They want you to not be able to vote for who you want to vote for. They want to wipe their asses with the votes that you did cast for the people you wanted to cast them for. And of course, they want to make you vote for somebody or trick you into voting for somebody that you shouldn't even be voting for because they are not running anymore. So they're keeping West off the ballot, but they're putting RFK back on the ballot. Why, folks? Because RFK could pull, I think they're right too, pulls votes in a state like Michigan from Trump. At least in their mind, they feel like if RFK is not there, they'll choose Trump. If he is,
all they've done now, though, is now Kennedy's come out and dropped anybody voting for him anywhere and told everybody, just vote Trump across the board.
He's going to have to do that. Yeah, he's going to have to.
He did it last week because of all these efforts. So I think
Robert,
my thought process is by election day, the only kind of person if they really leave. If I was on the Democratic side, I wouldn't have done this. And my logic is this: who is going to still vote for Kennedy once it's clear by election day, right? I mean, these voters are only getting bits and pieces now.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. Because
by election day, the only person that doesn't know everyone will know by that point that Kennedy has said vote Trump. if you support the Kennedy agenda. The only person who won't be able to do it is someone who would never vote for Trump. Is someone who down deep has a problem with Harris.
Let's show that. So here are the numbers of like Kennedy's voters that we polled before the announcement. 41.6% immediately said they will support Donald Trump now. All right. Or would. I mean, they're going to now because it was before it happened. So we said, what if this happens? Another 26% said they would go for Kamala. Right. So another 15% basically said someone else. But then when asked what if he endorses Trump, they would go for Trump. And then the rest were unsure, maybe would not vote at all. So what you're saying is the 42% are going to Trump regardless. That's good. And they would vote for Trump. They're going to, and they're not going to waste their vote on for no reason. The other 15% are going to learn he's supporting Trump now. So they're going to Trump. What you're saying is she could potentially be taking some of that 26.2% away that would go to her. Because like they had no other choice. They had no other choice.
They're the people who have ruled out Trump, and that leaving Kennedy's name on the ballot gives them an option to vote their dissent from Harris without voting for Trump, which was never an option. I think that there's a portion of the Kennedy vote, about 20-25%. I think that's the right vote, a percent of his vote that will never vote for Trump.
Yeah.
But that they're conscientious enough, they're going to vote. But if they have the option of Kennedy or Harris, they will vote Kennedy rather than Harris. Whereas if it was just Harris or Trump, that quarter of the vote would vote for Harris. And I think all they've done is guarantee in some of these close states that like, for example, especially in Michigan, you got West kicked off if you're the Democrat. West is the problem from Dearborn. Now you give them another chance, right? These are protests. These are Arab, Muslim, Dearborn protest voters. You give them any other option of a big name, even though Kennedy's pro-Israel and all the rest, they're going to take it. I mean, that's all you're doing if you're on the Democrat. You need to either get rid of everybody, or you need to or do it differently than the way they've done. And I just think I think they've outthought themselves, just like they did throughout the entire deal with Kennedy. They mismanaged that from beginning to end.
Could you imagine if that turned out to be the case? Because I'm thinking about some like even because I'm thinking about another demographic group too. Folks, for people who don't know this, I mean, like the older white working class Democrat ancestral voter had, been a voting group that Donald Trump was able to like pull away from Obama and win just enough of, but they are not Republicans. And some did that begrudgingly, may have turned and voted for Biden in 2020 over him. But will not like Harris. They're not going to like Harris. I mean, that's it. They're not going to like her. They did like Obama, so it's not about race or anything like that, folks. So, take that and stick it. They voted for Obama twice. It's more like she's an incompetent who doesn't have any tie to America whatsoever. Like you said, like there's an undertone here. There is. And it's not because she's a non-white woman, Robert. It's because she's a non-American, whatever, and they're not going to like that. And it's going to be hard for them to forget some of the things she had advocated for before in 2020. CNN was running around even Pennsylvania, different state, of course, but was running around Pennsylvania. And it fell on me that there were a bunch of like these voters, exactly who I'm talking about, older white guys that they were talking about walking around, and they voted for Trump, begrudgingly, then voted for Biden, and they're going back to Trump now or something. Maybe some of them don't know what they're doing. But CNN was like waiting for them to say, but this is Scranton. Aren't you going to vote for Harris? And they weren't having it. And when you asked them why, they would, they filled CNN's, or, they gave them a good dose of reality, brother. So, I mean, that's interesting, man. That's an interesting point. I wonder, wouldn't that be crazy?
I don't think they know they don't know how to play the third party angle very well at all. I mean, and not the way Clinton knew how to play the Perot angle, not the way Nixon knew how to maneuver the Wallace vote. Nixon didn't try to kick Wallace off of any ballots.
No,
he just let Wallace beat up on the Democratic Party amongst traditional Democratic Party voters.
Yeah.
And then in swing states came in and said, look, I can win. George can't vote for me. And it worked.
Yeah.
And there are multiple ways to work it, but Trump worked it brilliantly. They worked it terribly. Democrat, and they keep exposing themselves as the anti-Democratic Party. They want democracy to be the issue, and they keep finding new excuses to kick people off of ballots, new excuses to threaten to censor people. I mean, they are just clueless up there. I mean, I don't think, like people said, maybe, what's the October surprise? What's something like that? I just don't have, I don't think these people are competent. So, I mean, they write bad scripts. So predict a bad script. I think if they get something that they can work with out of the debate, they'll convince themselves again that she's going to win. And they'll get some bogus polls to back it up. And that'll be it. But now if they don't, then I guess they maybe, if you're a Democrat and after the debate it's done, I guess you shift down ballot, really. I mean, I don't know if any October surprise they could pull. They're going to change the economy overnight. They're going to change immigration overnight. I think even if they get a peace deal in Israel, that'll be nice. It'll help them on the edges. It won't move the needle enough.
Well, let me also show, we're talking about some of these other like kind of normie voters. I think I know what the disparity is here between our polling and the New York Times polling, but we both did find something pretty interesting. Looking by area, Robert, comparing 2020 to now, here's our poll in area type. We actually have the suburbs tied with the full ballot. Rural is Trump by some big margins, obviously. And then she's got urban by about the same amount, but they look a little bit closer. If you look at the New York Times poll that just came out, they have Harris up in the suburbs, but it's their definition, I think, of rural, which they also say small town. And I think a lot of people, when it's self-reported area, which is why we don't weight by self-reported area. Some people have no idea how to correctly classify where they are, but apples to apples here. In 2020, at this point in the cycle, we actually had Biden up by 7 in the suburbs. And now we have it basically dead even. If you look at the exit polls, what actually happened, Biden won the suburbs much closer to our margin. It was 2 points than the New York Times, which was finding ridiculous margins for Joe Biden in the suburbs. They were like massive. Their final poll, their crosstab, actually omitted area type, which I find to be very interesting, but they did. And I looked for it in articles and whatnot, and I did not find it. But they were showing suburbs and prior polls. And we're talking about insane margins, and including in the battleground states. So in our poll alone, Biden was up 7 at this point. Now it's about even. Really, the kicker here is that Trump is doing so well in urban America. He's getting the margins he always got in rural. By the way, he's actually a little bit bigger of a margin. Our poll in 2020 was 52 to 36. So he's obviously outpolling that in rural America right now. He's at 57 to 35. So, or 35 point something. I'll go back and look in a second, but people know the crosstabs are up on locals. Actually, the press release is out. You can go to Big Data Poll. And while you're at it, click on the link to the Public Polling Project and donate. All right. And share. Because this is what we're doing with it, guys. All right. This is what we're doing with it. So again, I mean, here you have Trump, in the spread, 10 points better. But I mean, that's what it seems to be the story everywhere. Biden winning in the burbs by 7 at this point. Now it's tied. Now I'm saying it's tied, but it's actually Trump +1, an 8-point swing. So, I mean, this is the story everywhere. I could look by party too. Trump has a lead with independents. And in 2020, it was not the case. Trump was down. Actually, he was down basically like 3 points. It wasn't. Our polling has always been like that. We don't have these huge margins for independents. We mainly because I think our independents are different, than some other polls. There's not as many true independents in this country as people may think. I will notice too, Robert, that something we've been backing up. Well, I don't want to jump too quick from the suburbs here. But we have a Republican identification question, which asks people who identify as Republican whether or not they identify as an America First Republican or a traditional Republican. Okay. For whatever reason, every Republican identifies more, or not majority, but more as an America First than a traditional. However, Hispanic and Black Republicans identify way more as America First than white voters. Way more. I mean,
yeah, exactly. I sent you a link. See if you can click on it. I thought it might be fun to go through some of the odds that are listed at Bet Online. They actually
I'll just go there. I'll just go there because I don't. Is it that you're talking about that site? Go there.
Yeah. The
Okay.
what is it? Because they have you can vote on margin. The bet on the state presidential margin by almost maybe every single state. And I thought it was interesting that and you can see that a lot of the odds
really?
there.
Check this out. I've never seen this site before. Check this out. It's
Yeah.
sports betting. It's sports betting, but I guess there's also politics.
Yeah. Yep. The
Is that it?
let me see. Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
And
cool.
if you go to see all the biggest markets or view all, then it'll take you to the politics section.
Where are we here? VIP, esports, poker, live betting.
Just go to sports.
Go to sports,
At the top
esports,
left.
sports. Gotcha. This is cool. This
And-
is by the way, this site's above and beyond here.
Oh yeah, and on the left-hand side, if you scroll down, you see politics,
Gotcha. Ooh, I
Bingo.
like this site.
and then you see state presidential margin.
State presidential margin. Ooh.
Isn't that great?
Oh, this thing is way beyond anything that is always,
There might, now that they won that case, one of the prediction markets won a case against the CFTC. They say they're going to open up a bunch of markets on on all the elections this fall.
Wow.
So we might see margins like this that currently are only available in various sports books
What
around the
state
world.
should we look at? What state you want to check out?
What was interesting to me is I was comparing it to the odds I gave out about a month ago, and on almost all of them, to be honest with you, I was going to see what you think. Alabama, I think he wins by more than 26.5. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, look at the margin in 2020, and Biden won the popular vote by over 4 points. So you're going to look at, he could win by 30 points, 32 points. I mean, it absolutely can happen. I even think Indiana is another one where because we're looking at, the different divisions and what that would mean if he won those census divisions by those kind of margins. Just to show, I mean, Indiana, for crying out loud. Where is the division? Here we go. The South Atlantic is a whole different world. This would suggest like 27 points, something like that. So over 26.5, 27 points in that division. So Alabama being one of the more obviously Trumpy states in that division. Yeah. 30, 32 points, you know?
So
something like that.
I like the over there. Alaska, 10.5. I like the over there. I think he wins by more like 15.
Yeah, Alaska's a lot of people get a little bit worried about Alaska because of the Senate races.
Right.
But I'll tell you, I mean,
that's a unique animal.
It's a unique animal. It is. It's a good way to put it. I'm curious about Maine. Let's look at Maine because I think that's probably going to be a misfire. All right. So over 8.5, under 8.5. Ooh.
That's an easy under 8.5.
That's an easy right. Listen, I'm not a gambling man, as you know, but I do like to handicap stuff for people. It's fun. It's just fun. I'm not out there running any kind of crazy book. All right. But this is a good one. Montana. Oh yeah. I mean, that's pretty.
Yeah, Trump's going to win that by 20 plus.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's within reason. New Hampshire, that's tough because
it is because of 2020. But I would lean under 5.5. If the Yankee vote is really, if Harris is not holding it, then that's going to be tight again. And her being in New Hampshire means that her own internals has it tight.
Yeah, I think New York, New Mexico, and New Jersey, I think they're going to be surprised. And New Jersey's over under 14.5, excuse me. New Mexico over under 10.5. I mean, Robert, he won it.
It's going to be single digits.
He won it by 10.5. Biden won it by 10. And he did so with Hispanics going. Let me look at Let me go back. I just want to make sure it wouldn't look specifically. Yeah. So 2020, and I don't believe this actually. I think the voter validated surveys have it closer to 37, right? They have him at the Edison had him at 32, which is pretty close to where we had him. We did with when people decided he actually did get to 37. And I think the Harvard co-op survey had Trump winning 37. If he is anywhere near, I mean, I guess, again, folks, the New York Times poll has him at 41. We have him with leaners at, well, it depends on the five-way. He's lower in the five-way race. He's at 38 in the five-way. But when you have just the head-to-head, he's at 41.3. So let's say he pulls that off. He outperformed among Hispanics in New Mexico, not once, but twice when you compare his overall support nationally. What I mean by that is if he won 32% nationally, he won 41 or 42% in New Mexico. All right. So he did it in 16 as well, by the way. So if that holds and he's taking 41% nationally, he could take 45, 48. In New Mexico, if past his prologue. And that would mean that 10.5 is way too high. He won whites against Hillary. He tied with whites against Biden. So Biden's entire margin statewide was damn near his margin with Hispanics being 60-40, right? So actually it was less than 60-40, but you know what I mean? So if this holds nationally, if the national numbers hold and we have to apply it, basically extrapolate to New Mexico, this is that will be a single digit race. So that's a good one too, Robert. That's a good one too.
What's interesting is they have Ohio at 10.5 for a Trump victory. But I would still go over on that.
I'm over on that. I'm over.
Now, there's a pollster that thinks it's going to be close in Oklahoma. You think it's going to be close in Oklahoma? I'm going to take over 36.5.
Here we go again, brother. Here we go again with the Missouris, the Oklahomas, the Texas, the Florida. I mean, look, I like Spencer, but bro, stop polling Florida, bro. Just stop. By the way, St. Pete polls. You should stop polling your own damn state. Marco Rubio did not win the Senate race by 2 points. All right. They only had DeSantis up by 8. They both won by identical margins, almost totally identical. And it was nearly 20 points. So, I mean, some of these, I'm curious about Florida. Let's look at Florida. I don't want to go back too fast. Oh, I passed it. Come on, Florida. Where is it?
Oh, they don't have Florida.
Oh.
Not sure why, but there's always a few states that are.
That's all right. It'll get
they're missing. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I assume it will get up at some point.
It probably
Hawaii 27.5. I think it's going to be a lot closer than that.
Hawaii was interestingly like New Jersey. They were the only two states that voted more for Obama in 2012 than they did in 2008, but reversed that trend as it kept going. So it was like a uniquely Obama phenomena. And now there are areas of Hawaii that have actually started to trend pretty red. And he's not going to win the state of Hawaii. That's not the point. The point is the margin. And I do think that Hawaii will be closer than normal. I could see California going back to being a traditional margin, except they're going to have to find the votes from somewhere else because the Central Valley is going to be Trumpy.
Right.
So
I have under even in California because they have it basically at 30.
Yeah.
And
I don't. Too much. That's too much.
It is. I think she's going to get 24, 25,
Yeah.
something like that. I think Oregon and Washington are going to be close. Oregon's another state that has English ancestry around the Portland region and parts of the rural areas. So that might explain why some of the polling has shown single digits. I think it's going to be single digits in Oregon.
Yeah.
And, I think they have estimated like 12.5. And then they have like.
So it's the number one pollster in the state, by the way. So does the number one pollster in the state. He's got a Harris +5 right now. That's it.
Exactly.
Harris
and Washington similar. I think they have 17.5 up here for Washington.
Let me go down and see. Washington is over under 17.5. Yep.
Yeah, I would say under. In fact, of all the states, frankly, I would just take Trump to exceed the margin in pretty much every single one.
They even have them over under 44.5 in Wyoming, which is the most Trumpy state in the union, folks. So but I don't know how, again, I mean, that's ballpark a couple of points better than what he did in 2020. So, like, if he's doing, I just don't know how
I think he's going to beat the odds pretty much across the board. That there's only a couple of states that,
this is cool.
Yeah. It's and it gives you an idea of what the real, like, if we put 538 up here and you bet that they overestimated the Democratic margin in every single state, you would have made money back-to-back elections. You literally would have gone 100-0, which you can't do unless your model is broken. I mean, you can't bet against a model that consistently as having a partisan bias and not. But it shows you where, like, they're picking up that Ohio's moving, but they're not picking up that Wisconsin and other states are going to move with them. Like, if you think Trump's going to win Ohio by 11, then he's going to win Wisconsin. He's going to win Pennsylvania.
Of course. And those are the polls, Robert. They're the ones giving this false impression. They have done this. And this is, by the way, we've been doing this little comparison exercise today, folks. This is what happened. It wasn't like this a year ago. It's after the switcheroo, we're starting to see similar dynamics in the big three, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And we're starting to see similar dynamics play out that we saw in 2016 and 2020. How Wisconsin is polling to so much more to the left of these other states. That is not going to, like, Wisconsin and Michigan are not going to vote 7-8 points away from each other. Like the CBS News poll, they have Harris barely up in oh no, that's not the one. It's another recent poll came out. I even heard Patrick Ruffini comment about it, but for people who don't know who he is as the Republican leaning, not his results. His results are actually quite lefty a lot, but he is a Republican leaning guy himself. Echelon Insights. He even commented about this the other day. Like, something is wrong with your poll if you have Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, basically tied or Trump up a little bit, and then you have Harris up by like 2 in Michigan, and then you have her up by like 8 in Wisconsin. There's something very wrong with your poll, and that has never happened to us. We have always had these states within a few points of each other, and I can actually show people from. I don't want to overlap my what is it, the crosstab, the new crosstab. But if we were to go to big data polls, 2020 election forecast, that's the public polling project is really what I'm talking about. You would see that these states were within 2 points of each other, like consistently, Robert. 2 points, maybe 3, because it is a damn sampling error. You're not going to see these kind of disparities in these states. And it's funny with these forecast models. They're like, yeah, she's got a 65% chance to lose Pennsylvania, but a 70% chance to win Michigan. Like, where, in what reality? You're just looking at the polls. That never happens in the vote. The polls constantly do this, but the vote does not. It never does it. At least especially not in the Trump era. I mean, these states are within a few points and have been for 8 subsequent elections, previous election cycles. Only the Dukakis situation with Wisconsin broke that pattern, but it's Michael Dukakis. I mean, it was, and George Bush. I mean, there was something very different there. You had Bush looking at his watch, backing up all of these affirmations they were saying about him. And it was different. It was just a different election. This is not that election. So I just don't buy it, man. When I see Trump eking out a victory in Pennsylvania, yet losing Wisconsin and Michigan, like that, that's nuts to me. Nuts.
Yeah. Too many overlapping constituencies that think alike. The interesting thing about, this Bet Online site, I was going to go through some of their debate odds and see.
Yeah, I was looking at that. I wanted to check that out, dude. Let's do it.
This will give you an idea of where they're getting their odds from. So for the debate winner, Kamala Harris, 75% favorite. So how do they determine the debate winner? Graded according to an ABC affiliated poll. If no such poll happens, any conducted by YouGov or Ipsos. So that's why you can take advantage of these bookmakers relying on bad pollsters. Now, I do think the media polls will call Harris the winner, almost no matter what happens. But what do you think?
Of course. I mean, if you look at the last debate, folks, they had Trump the winner in the CNN snap poll, but they didn't even have him winning by the large. I believe, I believe it was the second largest margin ever. But if you consider how badly lopsided that was, and then also who's watching the debate, think about who's actually watching the debate. So when you think about who won or lost the debate, I don't think we do it correctly. I think we really are focusing on the snap polls of very high interest voters that are going to be these cable news watchers. Well, guess what? That's not the electorate. And the electorate, largely, as much as I don't like this, I wish it wasn't the case, they're going to watch clips of it on social media, and they're going to digest it through each campaign's war room and the surrogates that are pushing out clips. And I'm telling you, I mean, it's going to be you could find clips on after that last debate with Biden where they were spinning it and that Biden did a fantastic job. Like there were clips of him sounding coherent for a second that were edited, and then that's it. You clip it and cut it, So, I mean, you can even find spinnable stuff there. But the audiences that are going to watch these debates, especially on cable news or network news, are going to be your more liberal boomers than even the population of like the boomer population. The seniors that are going to watch these these debates on these networks are going to be certainly more moderate than the senior population overall. And by the way, we didn't even get into that much. Oh yeah, we did. We talked about age. We did a little bit. But that's another group, by the way, that has been grossly it's appalled. Just awful results in the last couple presidential cycles. Hillary was doing so much better with white seniors. Biden was going to win seniors, folks, 50-44. Wait a minute, maybe make sure I got that margin correctly. In the 2020 New York Times poll, that's because who's taking their poll. That's the kind of scene. Doesn't mean Trump actually lost them. He didn't. He won them. 65 plus was Biden 51, Trump 41. So actually, I was wrong. The margin was Biden plus 10 among 65 plus. That didn't happen. Trump won that group, of course. But, this is who's going to watch it. It's not going to be the more conservative senior who watches that, at least not on that channel. They'll wind up watching it on social media if they do. I mean, that's just the way it is. We need to do this a different way. And honestly, why I'm like annoyed with Donald Trump with these debates, dude. Like, I don't understand the thinking. And I know what people are going to say. Well, Rich, you said he shouldn't debate Biden either. He shouldn't have, honestly. Why? Because he'd be running against Joe Biden right now. And I think there's parts of Joe Biden that make him a more difficult opponent than Kamala Harris. I do, but they weren't prepared to trot him out and to make him do this. He ultimately would have fell on his face. And if you're Trump, you're hoping that happens somewhere in mid-October, where they can't do the switcheroo. If he didn't do the debate, it would not have been able to pull the switcheroo. So I just feel like these debates don't serve the American voter anymore, man. Jim Lehrer is dead. The way of doing this is dead. It now serves Big Pharma and everyone else who funds it, that you'll see their commercials in between the debate when they go to a commercial break, when they leave. We're waiting to hear from people who are going to give their comments in the spin zone, different surrogates from the different campaigns. In between all of that, you're going to see who is really funding those debates and who they're really meant for. They're meant for corporate media and Big Pharma and big everything else. They're not meant for the voter. The entire setup is not the way that it's best to suit the voter anymore. It's been corrupted beyond repair. The Commission on Presidential Debates, I'm so sick of hearing about how bipartisan it is. The two Republicans on the commission hate Trump's guts. They're bushy Republicans. This is not a feasible way to do this anymore, Robert. It should be that you have each campaign, they're doing their own targeting. Let each campaign pick out a few people they targeted as persuadable voters to get in there and ask them their questions and have them have a discussion almost in a Lincoln Douglas style format. Only you don't need a moderator from big media. You really don't. Maybe you need somebody who could pull like who's the dude who used to host American Idol? The hell was the name of that guy, guys?
Well, Casey.
Yeah. We need somebody like that to like intro it, and then like outro it. And that's it, bro. That is it. Let the voters that the campaigns pick, because ultimately the campaigns will either be right or they'll be wrong, and they'll have served themselves or they wouldn't have. But all the while, it would have served the voter itself to have that kind of an experience. This is production news bullshit, and I'm just sick of it. And it really is. Once you have a state-run media, which we do, you can't conduct debates like this anymore. They're always going to be in the tank, even though everyone gave accolades to what's her name, Dana and what's his name, Jake. Thank you. I mean, you could go through Jake's emails on WikiLeaks right now and see that he himself communicated with the Democratic Party, asking them what questions to ask Ted Cruz, what questions to ask Donald Trump. These are, and he was leading Joe Biden during that debate. Like, you would lead, like, you're a lawyer, like Jake, objection, you're leading the witness, right? So it looked like he was being fair, but in fact he wasn't. And Dana did it the whole interview with Kamala Harris. Don't you mean, so what you're saying, even though it's not what she just said, she's leading the witness. They'll never do this correctly. They'll never do this right. It needs to be totally changed. And Trump had the power, and he's friggin' squandering it, dude. And it really pisses me off, because once he's gone, who's going to have this power again? Nobody. There'll be another politician who goes through the same shit, unless maybe it's JD. The guy's the only one with the balls to try to change something like this. Everyone else will just follow suit like a bunch of toe-the-line moronic Republicans, and we'll have this system forever. This has got to go, man. We need a different system, and it needs to be done earlier, not when people are requesting absentee ballots. For crying out loud, Minnesota's going to start voting soon.
Yeah, I agree with all those criticisms of the debate. I thought Trump could have set the rules better and would have put it on and changed the precedent going forward. But so some of the odds are, will Trump and Harris shake hands? It's like 85% no. I think there's a chance they do shake hands. What do you think?
I actually think he's going to have to shake her hand. He's going to have to at least.
If you like Trump, I mean, Trump's not personal in that way. It would only be if she doesn't want to shake hands or doesn't want to show that she's smaller than him. But she's a woman, so that doesn't matter as much.
No, he will. He's old school, man. He will afford her that courtesy. The only way that doesn't happen is if she doesn't do it. End of story. There's no way. There's no way he's not going to do that. That is not Donald Trump.
Yeah, you can get the yes.
What you may hear. It's not.
You get the. Yeah, exactly. It's not if you pay attention. The yes is that you can get a plus 250. So that's a nice little payoff. The second one that kind of interested me was what color of Kamala Harris's top, which was interesting because the favorite is white, but I thought blue at like 5-1. I could see it. Does she want to reinforce that she's black? Or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, how does she want? I think the color coding corresponds to that. But what do you think?
Oh, man, I think that's I do think she's going to do that, of course, because she has been, or does she not? Because they know from the polling they still have problems with black men. So I wonder if they're going to try to do that. You know what? I'm going to say no, because I'm going to say that, I'm going to say she's not going to go in that direction, because she's going to try to avoid having any more Carter family meltdowns on you that go viral on YouTube. By the way, you got to love those guys, man. They're so funny. For people who don't know the Carter family, you got to check them out. I tried to get them on Inside the Numbers. It just didn't happen. I don't know how I would have done it. The format would have been crazy, but I would have brought all of them on. They're great to watch. But I think she would not want to risk pissing any more young black men off. I really do. I think she's kind of hoping their women bully them into voting for Trump. I mean, voting for her, not Trump.
I would rule out white, silver, gray, and black. I'd rule out red because she doesn't want to play into commie.
No way.
So green still says money, and I don't know if she wants to be associated that way. So I think it's going to be blue, or I would say blue plus 5-1. I think is my favorite pick of those.
Yeah. Blue is good. That's blue or purple. Purple. It's possible she wears gray. I mean,
I could see the gray, but I'm just thinking she doesn't want to reinforce the I'm fake pretending I'm black routine.
Yeah, I mean, because she does that a lot. Silver gray, though, it says, Robert, and silver is like That's tough. That's too much. That's too much. Yeah. All right. Let's go with blue. Let's go with
5-1. That's a good long shot bet.
Purple. There's no purple. So I'm going with blue. Orange.
Yeah. Then you have all the who's going to get mentioned. And I thought this was interesting.
Oh, yeah. Total mentions.
Yeah. So like Biden 8.5. So I don't see her wanting to mention Biden. Is Trump really going to mention Biden 9 or more times? I don't see that.
Maybe not that many, but I gotta see him saying at least once that you knew about Biden's state of mind and you lied.
And I think you want to do the Biden Harris.
And then he'll have to say Biden appointed you the border czar. So that's right. 2. 8.5 though. I mean, I
don't see him winning. Yeah, I think that's. I like the under it even.
I'm an under. Yeah, I'm an under on that, bro.
I'm over, I think, on the next one. How many mentions for Obama? I think she wants to mention Obama as many times as she can.
Yeah, I don't know that he would want to.
He would.
Unless he makes it wisecrack. Like, I think you've talked more with Obama than your own husband. I could see that, man. What about, is there a Willie Brown in here? Is there a Willie?
No, there's no Willie.
Come on.
That would have been good. That would have been a smart one. Now, Vance 3.5. I see under. I don't see any reason for Vance's name to come up a lot.
Under. I'm not even sure unless they're asked a question about their respective vice presidential picks. They won't do it. They just won't. It's not. It doesn't happen during presidential.
I don't see Waltz coming up a lot either.
I mean, unless the only way he comes up, because she's not going to bring him up with the stolen ballot. She's not going to do it. No way. Unless Trump says, you're as phony as your stolen valor vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz. Like, that's the only, I mean, I think he should stay away from that kind of stuff. Maybe, no, maybe not. I mean, we all know what he's trying to do. Win the mail vote by a margin never seen before, make them 51% of the electorate in Wisconsin, which they can be. Like we hear about all the time, women. In some of these Rust Belt states, folks, it's actually all about the men. And men can in Wisconsin, for instance, men can outvote women. It has happened twice in the last 4 election cycles. One, and actually Scott Walker, I believe every single election Scott Walker won, men were more of the electorate than women, although he didn't do terrible with women anyway. It's just in the last one, he lost them pretty good. But, Wisconsin can be 51-49. So I just don't, I don't know. Over 3.5 times, it's a little bit much.
Yeah. And then the 2 more that I liked. One was the final Trump word. Is it going to be again? America, back, you, great, good night, Harris, communist.
It could. I'm going to go with you because or again. It's either going to be you or again. But even if he says we'll make America great again, it'll still say thank you at the end of that. So I'm going to go with you.
Yeah, especially at 5-1. That's good odds. And then
Harris, what do you think though with Harris? What do you think? Even though is it on here? Harris, I think I've heard her say good night 3-4 times in a row as her last.
Yeah, word. The Harris final word is down. They have America as the favorite, and then it's you, back, freedom, good night, again, fascism, Trump.
I think it's going to be night, good night, because she has this twitch she does. It's like this. She gets in this I don't know, her software glitches or something, dude. Have you seen it? She's like, good night, thank you, good night, good night,
great,
good night,
good night. We can finish on that one. That's 16-1. So people might make some good money tomorrow night. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, folks, check it out. I mean, you got to, it's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. Go check it out. This is probably the coolest betting site I've seen yet, Robert. I'm serious.
Oh, yeah. They have tons of fun little odds like this. You can just do it internally if you want. If you're doing a little debate watch party with your community, with your friends, etc. I always like the tie stuff and things like that. Like, it's a heavy favorite for Trump to wear a red tie and a blue suit. And I'm like, does he ever not for a debate?
Dude, that's it.
I think one of them he did a blue tie, didn't he? Like one of the Hillary debates, maybe.
I mean, the one I'm still thinking about, Hillary, you want to rip babies out of
I
the
think he
womb.
wanted
That
to
was
pull
bedtime.
back and present like a more sedated Trump.
That must have been post Billy Bush. Must
Yeah,
have been.
it probably was. Boy, he was really ready. That Trump was not a guy to put up on in a corner.
That
Trump
was
in a
the
corner
best
he was an
performance.
animal that night. Because
That was the
remember, you
best
got the famous
performance
Bill
ever.
Clinton look because he brought in
Yep.
all the women that Bill Clinton had harassed and assaulted over the years, and he got the Clinton eye look. Remember that when he's looking with his eyes like this?
Dude, I miss Steve, man. You have Steve Bannon tell you that story about how all that transpired. It's the funniest stuff ever. You will laugh your ass off. But yeah, the more you push Trump in a corner, the better he is. And he put up that night, man. I remember saying, like, he's got to put on an exceptional debate performance, and he cannot like fall into the typical trap, and he didn't. And he threw them for this is a guy that just had that video come out, and everyone's telling him, even Republicans, Reince Priebus, you're done. You have to give this nomination to Mike
Everybody
Pence.
but Steve Bannon told him he
Get
had to
out.
drop out. And he's gonna lose.
Everybody but Steve Bannon told him he had to go, Robert. And he goes in there and just turns it around on them, brings the Clinton rape victims, turns to Hillary Clinton, you'd be in jail. I mean, like, this was just an epic performance by a guy. I mean, you should see that Donald Trump almost. I would like to see the post-assassination attempt Donald Trump come to the stage tomorrow night. That's what I would like to see, because
I thought he was masterful the first time. Like, he just
one
stayed
hand
calm,
holding.
he did the facial gestures.
That's
He's like, well, I don't think he knows what he's saying either.
The rules, the rules are gonna hurt her because he's a master at making these faces while people say stupid shit. So when he's like,
and she's gonna come across as, I think if I was advising her, I would be, don't come across as a bossy chick. Come across as, strong woman who'll stand up to Trump, but not a bossy chick, because that's what's driving her numbers down amongst men.
Especially among men.
You don't want to be, girl boss. Don't be the girl boss. Don't play into the meme of the girl boss. I don't think she's going to be able to help herself. I think she's going to play right into girl boss.
It is what she is. It's hard to hide who you are after half hour. I mean, like, you can pitch a BS act for only so long. And that's what I imagine Trump's going to do, something to try to get under her skin. He better be careful on how he does it, though, because it could come across like
be smart, be creative.
Gotta be creative.
You're the strong favorite to see her as the gnat that she is, hammer away at the issues and expose her connection to the most problematic aspect of those issues.
The Afghan withdrawal, she said she owned and was very comfortable with it. The immigration thing, still, there's so many people who don't know she was put in charge of being the border czar. And then 3, I cannot tell you the highest testing attack on her was that America believes that she lied to the country and about Biden. And this thing, like, we could not trust you to tell the truth about the president's state of mind. We cannot trust you for anything. And that's it. I mean, because that's what I'm telling you, we hear this from voters during interviews. I don't know her well enough. The New York Times got it over the weekend. In case you didn't read the whole poll, folks, go read the whole poll. They're saying now they don't know her. They're like, standoffish, and they don't trust her. They got to learn more to see whether they can trust her. If they tune into that debate and Trump says that alone, man, it's going to hurt bad. I'm telling you.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I think long term, the debate will not change anything. Short term, it might change response bias depending on media coverage. Yeah. But you want to go to the super chats?
Yeah, let's check out the super chats. And by the way, there are 2 model updates. I mean, I'm getting pinged it. The Economist model went for Trump today. That's one of the most liberal leaning models. And I believe our old friend, the Slimer, is approaching 70% Trump win. And actually, it's almost new high, 64.4%. So good afternoon, gentlemen. Should the House or Senate Republicans shut down the government over the SAVE Act? Will it help them politically down ballot? I think they would. They're very little. I mean, Robert, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, but I think they're so low on time here. They should be doing bigger things, like shutting down the government's the same tired old act that's going to get the media to pile on them. And it's going to look like a political stunt because they haven't been willing to do it before. Now they're doing it during an election season.
I think it doesn't matter if they should or not, because they won't. It's just not. It's not in the mental backbone of the people that are in Washington in power right now.
find some issues to champion, guys. You know, like Robert was saying earlier. What Robert was saying earlier, that will do the most. What? I don't even want to talk about this. My buddy Tim Pool giving the Slimer BJs. I mean, oh God.
A lot of people are going to be tempted because he wants to tell a drama narrative to draw attention because he's out at 538.
He's tricking you.
It's going to be way up, and then all of a sudden Harris is surging, and then it's way back, and then Harris is surging.
The only one who gets this? Why are you?
It's obvious garbage. I mean, the guy just pimps out bogus story. He's still living off of getting 2012 right, even though he got it right for the wrong reason. He doesn't even know it. So
he's a scam artist. And Tim, be smarter. Come on, man. If Happy Gilmore saw himself like that, he'd kick. I don't understand, but what am I missing? The movie Vice will tell you about Dick Cheney. You need to do a video on Alan Lichtman. I have commented about Alan.
Yeah, well, closer to election day, we'll break down the flaws in the various models that are out there.
Subjective.
I mean, the problem is primarily with all of them one, a model is bad when you can predict it will be biased 100 out of 100 times in every single state in back-to-back presidential elections.
Yeah.
So that's sign number one. But your short-term and long-term predictability needs to be above average if you actually have a successful model. Imagine saying, "Oh, yeah, I have a great sports betting model. We lose all the time, but hey, it's a model." Just calling it a model means nothing. Calling it, anybody that's been in the sports betting world's heard somebody say, "Oh, I got a model." It's usually a sign, okay, now we're going to lose money. The bookie's got a model too, bro. So you want to see how accurate it is, how consistent it is.
Yeah.
The problem with Lichtman's system has been it's too subjective. He pretends it's objective and then it's subjective. For example, what we've laid out here is for the economy. Look at what working class people actually say.
Objective variable.
What do they survey? Well, we've got consumer confidence data that goes back 60 years. We've got Gallup data that goes back 60 years. So how do people? Do they say the economy's good? Do they say it's fair? Do they say it's poor? Do they say it's bad? What do they report? Aside from data that's clearly being manipulated in Washington, D.C. I mean, they keep changing the payroll report and the unemployment report and every other jobs report.
GDP.
GDP. I mean, GDP and GDI don't match. That doesn't make any sense at all. Not the degree of disparity that's taking place. They're lying. We're probably already in recession. But ask working class people, and they're saying the economy sucks, and they've said so for a year. That's how you measure whether the economy is good or bad, if that's part of your model. If you want to look at domestic chaos, you want to look at international war, then you'll look at what people say. Do people feel safe or not? Are people listing issues like immigration or crime higher than normal? Use those metrics because those are third-party objective metrics, not subjective metrics like Lichtman can just change whenever he feels like it. And so most of his model.
There's no scandal during the Biden administration. Sure. I mean, there are only people who died trying to hold on to airplanes because they botched the withdrawal in Afghanistan. His son is a scumbag crook. I mean, and they're going to get him, what are you talking about? Bank transfers that clearly show pay for play. I mean, but that's not a scandal. Obama had the IRS sick on, he sicked the IRS on his political opponents. That was not a scandal. I mean, there's no turmoil overseas right now. We have 2 wars going on right now, and that's not
draining a massive amount of money and has been the center of a lot of public attention. And again, shows up in public opinion poll of people worried about World War III and not feeling safe. So, the problem with all of these so-called models is that most of them are not really objective. If they're too subjective, then they're the eye of the beholder, and they're no longer models really. And so that's where the models we use independent third-party objective data to support the component that we think is part of the fundamentals.
And by the way, folks, perception on the economy is everything. They tried this in 2016, and the economy is just the new normal, and it's doing great. But Americans didn't believe that, and they and that cost.
And the numbers right now are worse than they have been since 1920, since the Great Depression.
We
went over this a couple of shows ago. That may not remember, the ordinary voter is reporting the worst economy since the Great Depression. Many of the working class reporting worse numbers in key areas. Can they afford a home? Can they afford a car? Things of this nature. Than the peak of the worst of the global financial crisis of 2008. Worse than 2001, worse than 1991, worse than 1982. Worse. I mean, You're seeing numbers we've never seen before. And it's very rare to have people say the economy sucks and the cost of living is terrible. Usually it's inflation, but I have at least a good job. But the problem is it's not keeping up with cost of living. They're saying, no, the economy sucks and the cost of living is way too high. We haven't had those two combined very often ever in American history. And then you add to that the fundamentals of their prospects going forward. Can I get a house? Can I get a car? Can I have a little vacation money? Can I get a better job a year from now? Those are record lows. So that's the numbers that Harris is running into a brick wall. And what we predicted was that the sugar high of response bias, when it faded out, the numbers would come back to reality, that's what's driving this election. Identity politics won't save it. A media boosting or a debate performance won't save it either.
Yeah. Yeah, because you couldn't get any more glowing coverage, folks, than she already got during the convention. It did nothing for her. Are the betting odds for the Senate not confirming Trump if he wins? Are there betting odds for that? If so, what are the odds? I don't know.
There are no odds out there that I know of on that, but I don't see them going that far. Democrats, first of all, have burned that bridge. How do they come back and claim now you can contest an election?
I don't know.
They tried to lock everybody up in 2020.
I put nothing below these people anymore, though.
That's true. I mean, I agree there, but I just mean that they needed to set that up. When Democrats are planning something like that, they need to shift and set it up, and they'll plant little seed, plant little seed, and plant little seed. You haven't seen any of that. They're still doubling down on, I think it'd be smart for Trump to challenge Harris on this exact issue. Say, I guarantee you, I'll accept the results of an honest election. Will you, Kamala Harris, accept the results when you lose on November 6th?
Script. You should flip because you're going to lose. So the only question is whether you would, because when they're going to bring that up. I guess.
Oh yes, they're planning on that being a big catch. Trump still won't accept election. And
he shouldn't fall into it. He should just totally ignore it and say, well, first of all, she's going to lose. I'm going to win. So the only question is whether or not she will accept that I win this election. Jonathan, I think, is dead on here. He says because he seems to get the ethnicity thing and the Yankee thing and he probably read Kevin Phillips, frankly. Minnesota tracks with Maine and New Hampshire in vote margins. If the latter two flip, then Minnesota is game to turn red for the first time in 5 decades. I couldn't agree more.
Survey USA has it closer. I mean, we told everybody Wall Street does not have any special appeal, that VPs don't actually help you any for a state. VPs are about branding the top of the ticket. They're not about carrying individual states. And that Walz had nothing special at all. He proved that in the last gubernatorial election. He had a major funding advantage, the incumbency advantage, media coverage advantage, and he got crushed outside of the Twin Cities. Survey USA now saying it's 5 points closer than they had in 2020. And what we're seeing is consistently certain groups are trending back away from the Democratic Party, and it's showing up consistently in the same cross section of states, whether it's Oregon, where you have an above average Yankee population, Minnesota, Maine, or New Hampshire.
Yeah, Peppers says that where she lives in Northern California, she sees Trump signs everywhere. She hasn't seen any Kamala Harris yard signs. I'm getting to wear my MAGA hat when I used to be verbally or physically assaulted, and she's an hour from San Fran. So, this goes to what Cernovich says too. You can just walk around and support Trump now, without having to worry about that at one point. Whereas, that was not the case in the past. He's more popular than ever. And you're way more likely to run into somebody who gives you a thumbs up, a high five, or a pound than getting pounded, which is what used to be the case in the past. I live in Ireland, and bookies here have Trump at plus 700 to win Maine and plus 800 to win New Hampshire. Worth a bet?
Oh, yeah. I would place the odds at both at 2-1. I think, does that sound like fair? 1 in 3 chance Trump wins those states, as opposed to the 1 in 8, 1 in 9, 1 in 10. Because 1 in 8, 1 in 9, 1 in 10 is telling you it's going to be an 8 to 10 point margin again. I don't see that. I think it's going to be tight in both places. I
don't either. I mean, especially in Maine, I just don't see it. They just don't want to print new ballot. Oh, okay. That's from what we were talking about. They think Democrats are planning to steal Texas. You only need a social security number on it. We've gone over this before. Yes. You want to adjust it again? Because there are people out there that are hyping this, and it's I constantly have to address this.
Yeah. There's several different things. One is the number of illegals on the ballot rolls is much smaller than the number of people who could send in bogus mail-in ballots that are citizens of the United States.
That's right.
The latter is your greater risk. Second, very unlikely in Texas. The both the attorney general and there's a lot of they've been very proactive in Texas on the election front. So I don't like they've gone. I mean, consistently Paxton goes after counties that are trying to do something scammy and scummy. The governor has repeatedly done the same. So I don't see a high risk of that in Texas. So I get some people focus on what IDs match or don't match and so forth. That's not going to be the focal point. The risk point is always going to be mass mail-in balloting. And they're losing. Like, for example, if they were mass registering Democrats, it should show up in voter registration numbers.
They're down very. Their requests are really, yeah, and they're down. Their requests, as a percentage, is down considerably in North Carolina. Republicans are up by like 5, but they're down by 11%. So it's like, and by the way,
the mail-in ballot request way down everywhere for
way
Democrats.
down. And some schmo on Twitter was like, "Oh, this is great. This means this is outside of the margin for Trump. He can't catch up." And I was like, "Look, I hate to break your bubble, but by this time in 2020, Democrats were 11 points higher and Republicans were 5 points lower, and Trump carried the state. So you also don't know how independents are even voting. So I don't know why you think you know. Yeah, and that's one thing Sean Trendy always used to be good about. Like, reading the early vote tea leaves is tricky and it's very misleading. There's a whole scam industry from like Tony Boner from Target Fart. He does that shit every year, and it's always good for Democrats, even when it's not. And in Virginia, for those of you who have been watching Inside the Numbers for a while, you remember how he came after me when we published the Youngkin +2 in Virginia. And then he was like, "Let me show you this." All right. I'm like, dude, first of all, your data sucks. All right. Because we all know where you get it from, and your data blows. It's not even close to industry standard good. That's number one. Number two, that's down from the last off-cycle gubernatorial election for Democrats, certainly down from 20, and it doesn't matter anyway because you don't know how any of those people are voting, and Virginia isn't partisan, so you have to infer whether they're a Republican or a Democrat. There's no registration by party in Virginia, folks, so he doesn't even know. He thinks his database is giving him so many other attributes that he's able to peg whether you're a Democrat or Republican. Some ones are easy. Did you vote in a Republican primary or a Democratic primary? Do you donate to one or the other? Some of that is very easy. But even that, Robert, I mean, in this era, in this realignment era, it's very difficult to just take somebody's record on the database and think in some of these states, Macomb County, Michigan, that's another good one. And then Virginia has similar issues as well. Just because they were maybe a Democrat, 10 years ago does not mean they are now. North Carolina, that's another one. But we have registration by party.
The registration mail-in ballot request correspond to is from like polls, we're seeing a decline in the Democratic edge amongst, are you very excited to vote? Are you paying a lot of attention to the election? These various proxies that have historically been accurate at predicting voter participation rates. Democrats had anywhere from a 5 to 10 point edge in 2020 on those metrics, and key low propensity Democratic voting constituencies did as well. Now they have 5 to 10 point deficits, and it's showing up in the registration. It's showing up like now is usually when there's a surge of Democratic registration, kids going back to college campuses, for example, and targeted Democratic voter registration efforts. Well, they're doing those efforts. It's just not working. They're not getting the same level of interest. And then the same now is when they're ratcheting up requesting ballots. They're not getting the same level of interest. And that was predicted in like-to-like polls, meaning the same kind of pollster asking the same questions.
Yes.
For the last 2 months. And Harris got a quick, short boost and then it vanished overnight. And so I think that turnout, the mail-in voting where it's more liberalized will help balance that out to where it's not as Trump lopsided as it would be naturally without mass mail-in voting. Right. But it will be nowhere near what it was in 2020.
Yeah, and the other one on locals asked if we had seen the FAU polls in North Carolina and Georgia. Trump is up in both. He's not a great poll. I will say this. FAU is the one that I was talking about when I said before, and I just didn't blast them on Twitter, but they have, but I did bring them up here. I did. They have no record in some of these states. So to dip in one of the biggest states in battleground states in the country, Georgia has some of the most counties where you have to break it up into various different regions within the state. They don't know their ass from a hole in the ground about what to do with Georgia. I'm sorry, they don't. They can't even pull their own state. Just because it's a neighboring state doesn't mean they have a grip on it. They don't. North Carolina, very, very tricky. That being said, they do have Trump up in both states, narrower than you would think he's going to win them by. But if you look, Robert, in that sample in their Georgia poll, it's like D+6. Bro, if you think Democrats are going to have a 6-point turnout advantage in Georgia, like past the crystal, bro, I don't know what the hell you're smoking. I mean, this is so insane. How do you not know that's a response bias? Like, how do you not know you did something wrong? And this is what I mean when I say, because they are lefties over there, they're conducted by Main Street Research. This is what I mean when I say that they're not exploiting polls the way you think they are. They know that's a bad sample. They know that's an unrepresentative sample. They're just releasing it anyway. They're just doing it anyway. That's all. I mean, they can get away with it by saying, well, what would you have done? Would you have waited by this? And we don't, it's we disagree on this philosophy or whatever it may be. They know what they need to do, but they don't have, first of all, probably don't have the budget to set quotas and stratify the way that you must, to make sure you don't, have every liberal in the world answer you in Eastern Georgia and it's just like fill with Savannah or something instead of the rest of the counties. But yeah, I mean, that's basically the last one. I'll let you react to that and we can boogie because it's 419.
Yeah. Just a little shout out to On Point Politics. He's doing some polling analysis as well as Red Eagle Politics and some others.
Yeah.
So you can follow him on YouTube and elsewhere, that is trying to sort of borrow and capture some of the information that we've brought about here and apply it in real life.
On point, man.
Yeah. And so the election is going how we said it was going to go for the last year. And the only open I don't think the debate's going to change anything tomorrow. I'll see if we have a little fun making a little bets tomorrow. So see if any of those cash just for
yeah. We'll come back on Monday and see what was what here.
Exactly. I think Trump will do fine regardless of what the media says. I think Harris will hold up okay, probably not have a major gaffe, but it won't change the core fundamentals, which is what's driving this election. And this is Trump's in the driver's seat. And the only question is whether Republicans for the Senate and the House jump in the car with him and RFK or stay outside the car and end up behind in the election. That's really the only thing I'm watching for the rest of the election.
You summed that up beautifully. I mean, the bottom line, folks, is that he's ahead in Pennsylvania. Both campaigns know it. Everyone knows it. And if he carries Pennsylvania, it's over. I mean, if she does have a major gaffe tomorrow, it's over. It's over because she can't afford that at this point. So, and they'll have a difficult time carrying the water and the bullshit for her if that happens. So she's under tremendous pressure, though. What Robert, the one thing is that she's never really done well under pressure. So, like, we'll see. I expect she'll do all right. But if she does have a gaffe, it's done. I think it's done. It's done. Move on. Yeah. But tell people where to go check you out. And by the way, again, one more time, I just want to give people that you could do the subdomain, but just go to betonline.ag and then you can pick where you want to go from there. That's the coolest website on the internet, man. When it comes to betting, that's way fun. That's cool.
We have all of our political bets as well as sports bets. Bet on all the football games every week, or have bets on football, American football, European football, you name it. All that at sportspicks.locals.com.
Otherwise known as soccer. All right. Yeah. See you. I'm American full through and through, bro. Red-blooded. I'll see you next Monday, Robert. All the best, my friend. All right, later, guys. Don't forget, follow Robert over there. Don't forget to check out the Public Polling Project. As always, share it far and wide. Contribute what you can. I'm going to end with a clip from Harry Enton, which deals with these states. All right. And her rapidly vanishing lead that wasn't really a lead. That was a response bias. I'm not saying the race didn't get closer temporarily. I'm telling you that it was never hers. She was never in the driver's seat. That is a textbook response bias, and we're dealing with it the best we can. All right. I will see you all next Monday. Don't forget that Inside the Numbers is at noon Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday and Friday. I think next week, though, we're going to change to, if we don't keep it at noon, it'll be at 1, but we're going to wind up changing very, very soon. I want to do it this week to an hour a day every week. Well, really, it's not, every day, each week. It would be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because we have What Are the Odds on Monday. All right, here's Harry Enton from CNN on her rapidly vaporizing lead, and I'll see you guys soon. Be good.
Right, and do a better job than I did of just circling Pennsylvania.
I'm going to be additive. I couldn't do a better job. I'm just going to make the product you've made even better. So I just want to take a look at Pennsylvania, 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 and what we see is a tightening race in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. All right, this is Harris versus Trump margin in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. A month ago, when you looked at the polls, New York Times +4 Harris, +3 Quinnipiac for Harris, Franklin and Marshall +3 for Harris. But look at polls that have come out over the last week or so, and what do we see? We see a much tighter race. We see a tie in the CBS News YouGov poll. We see a tie in the CNN SSRS poll. And this, to me, is part of an emerging pattern, which is in a very pivotal state. What we saw was a small Harris lead, but within the margin of error, becoming a race that is way, way, way too close to call at this particular point, one that is even.
You say very pivotal the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania could be. How pivotal?
How pivotal. All right, so let's take a look at this particular map. This is with the betting favorites, but with Kamala Harris taking the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania over here. What do we see? We see that Kamala Harris wins in this particular case. Look at that, with exactly 270 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 268. All right, so Kamala Harris wins the Electoral College when she wins the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But let's take Pennsylvania out of Kamala Harris's column and put them in a Donald Trump's column. Again, with the betting favorites, with Trump taking Pennsylvania. What happens when we turn Pennsylvania red? Well, take a look here. Donald Trump wins in the Electoral College, 287 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 251 electoral votes. So that is why I say it is pivotal. Yeah.
It is so important. It's worth adding letters. I will say
it's worth adding letters. I can't even.
We don't have to hear the rest. He can't speak, but we all have a tongue-tied situation. All right, folks, have a great rest of the day. We'll see you soon. Nothing but love for you.